Chapter 375. More than half of Reverend Daoxian's face was shrouded in shadows, indistinct. Towards Tian Bai's voice, he seemed to turn a deaf ear, did not react at all, still quietly sitting there. Tian Bai stood and looked at him for a moment, did not say anything, but the expression on his face grew heavier. His lips moved slightly, striding forward, walked to Reverend Daoxian's side, less than 3 chi away from him on another praying mat, also sat down. In the great hall, silence. Southern border, 10,000 great mountains, scorched black mountain peaks. Along the way, the eerie ghost howls grew louder and louder. The Yin wind that came from nowhere also howled incessantly, blowing on people's bodies like knives, if not for Ghostly and Jean Pinger's profound skills. Just this ghost wailing and the cold Yin wind would be enough to drive them crazy. The surrounding eerie atmosphere became more and more intense. Both of them also became more cautious, but until they reached the bottom of the valley, where they could see the subdued devil ancient cave's deep and dark entrance, they did not encounter any danger or ambush. This place that was like a ghost town was unbelievably quiet. Not to mention there were no ferocious demon beasts. Even the poisonous insects and ferocious beasts that were seen everywhere since they entered the 10,000 great mountains were all nowhere to be seen. This eerie place seemed to be the safest place in this barren land of 10,000 great mountains. Ghostly and Jean Pinger stood on a small hill, gazing at the ancient deep cave. Indistinctly they could still see the stone statue standing at the entrance. Both of them frowned slightly. At this moment, the unexpected peace brought them even greater worry. Jean Pinger pointed to the cave entrance, said, "That is the subdued devil ancient cave. When I was following that black-attired man here, I saw with my own eyes the beast deity being reborn from this cave." Ghostly nodded slightly, and then looked around the cave. Other than that bottomless dark cave entrance, the cave was surrounded by vertical precipices, grotesque rocks, and several zhangs above the cave. Close to the stone walls was a thick layer of black clouds, slowly moving in the air like a water cloud. Looking at that thick black color, without asking, it must be a highly toxic substance. At first glance, an ordinary person would definitely have nowhere to go. It was a land of death. Withdrawing his gaze, Ghostly pondered for a moment and said, "Shall we go in?" Jean Pinger hesitated slightly. She was silent for a long while before finally nodding her head and said, "Forget it. Since we are already here, how can we retreat and advance? Let's go." Ghostly glanced at her, saw that Jean Pinger's expression was strange. Her face also looked slightly pale. Clearly she still had some misgivings about that mysterious cave. Actually, not only her. Even the monkey Xiao Hui on Ghostly's shoulder seemed to have changed its temper and appeared especially quiet. As if she felt something, Jean Pinger turned her head and looked at him, suddenly smiled, revealing her beautiful white teeth, smiled and said, "I am fine, let's go." Ghostly nodded his head and walked ahead. Jean Pinger followed behind him, slowly walking towards the subdued devil cave. The sound of their footsteps stepping on the hard, scorched black rocks was quickly drowned out by the incessant whistling Yin wind. The closer they got to the entrance of the ancient cave, the stronger the Yin wind became, the colder the eerie cold air contained in the wind. By now, both of them had already discovered that the source of the Yin wind that filled the mountains and plains was actually blowing out from that ancient cave. As they got closer to the cave entrance, the surrounding light seemed to gradually dim. More and more light was blocked by the black clouds above the subdued devil ancient cave entrance, as if this place did not allow light to enter. And standing at the deep cave entrance, facing the deep end of the cave, that stone statue gradually appeared clearly before their eyes. This stretch of road was not considered very long, but to the both of them, it seemed to have been a very long time. When they finally stood at the entrance of the subdued devil ancient cave, the sky had already completely darkened. Not long ago, the warm sunlight that shone on them had completely disappeared above the black clouds. Ghostly slowly turned to the cave entrance, stood in front of that female stone statue. The dim light shone on her body, thousands of years of wind and frost, had slowly carved the initially soft and beautiful smoothness into roughness in the vicissitudes of time. How many eyes had once so indifferently and quietly gazed at your face? Time like the water in the long river, surging forward, never once stopping for a moment, the first touching, the first memories, the countless traces that were once deeply engraved in the heart, so, in the end, would still be forgotten by people, leaving only that remnant trace of a legend, after a long time, was inadvertently brought up by the later generations. Your once beautiful, once heroic, in front of time, turned into ashes and dispersed like smoke. The icy cold wind brushed past his clothes and blew on his body. Thousands of years of gazing, perhaps, in the end, could not compare to remorse in a single thought. A soft hand lightly patted on his shoulder. The monkey Xiao Hui's cries rang in his ears. Ghostly's body shook slightly, abruptly took a step back, and then with a start, he realized that unknowingly, while staring at this young female stone statue, he had lost himself. With that thought, Ghostly's back felt like it was pricked by needles, his heart slightly shocked. With his current level of cultivation and determination, facing this Linglong shaman Lady Stone statue, he still unknowingly lost himself. The strange power contained in this stone statue was really not to be underestimated. Ghostly composed himself, and then turned to look at Jean Pinger. If not for Jean Pinger's reminder, facing this stone statue, he really did not know how long he would have lost himself in it. But why would Jean Pinger be on guard against this stone statue that could not be detected by anyone? Could it be that this girl had unexpectedly hidden her strength? Ghostly turned his head and looked over, and could not help but was stunned, although Jean Pinger was standing beside him and stretched out her hand to pat his shoulder, but her entire body was facing the opposite direction from Ghostly, facing the entrance of the cave, her back facing the stone statue, completely not looking at the statue's face. Ghostly frowned, said, "What are you doing?" Jean Pinger smiled and said, "This stone statue is very powerful. Didn't I tell you before?" Ghostly frowned again, snorted, and took a deep breath. At this moment, Xiao Hui, who had been crouching on his shoulder, seemed to be impatient. Its monkey tail wagged and suddenly jumped out from Ghostly's shoulder, jumped onto that stone statue. After climbing a few times, finally sat on the head of the stone statue. Ghostly's countenance changed. Suddenly, in a deep voice, said, "Xiao Hui, come over." The monkey looked at Ghostly, scratched its head, called out twice, but in the end still jumped back from the statue to Ghostly's shoulder. Jean Pinger laughed lightly and said, "Why are you scaring the monkey? It is just for fun." Before she could finish, Jean Pinger revealed a surprised expression. Looking at Ghostly's serious expression, tidying his clothes, he respectfully bowed towards the stone statue. Jean Pinger asked, "What are you doing?" Ghostly's face was indifferent, did not answer, only stared deeply at the stone statue, cupped his hands, and then turned, lightly said, "Nothing, let's go in." The ancient cave was deep and serene. The Een wind gusted. It was right in front of them. Jean Pinger followed behind Ghostly, looked at the bored monkey Xiao Hui, and then at Ghostly said, "Why did you bow to the stone statue just now?" Ghostly's footsteps paused for a moment, and then continued forward. His mouth indifferently said, "The demeanor of the predecessors. Even though it has long disappeared, but in the human heart, there is always something worthy of respect." Jean Pinger frowned deeply, clearly puzzled by Ghostly's riddle-like words. Was about to ask, but Ghostly was already near the cave entrance. Jean Pinger hurriedly chased after him, frowned, and said, "Hey, I'm talking to you. Why are you walking so fast? I have not told you, the last time I came here, there was a fierce spirit here, although it was most likely eliminated by that beast deity, but this cave entrance most likely." Speaking till here, Jean Pinger's voice suddenly trailed off. Almost at the same time, Ghostly's footsteps also stopped. The two of them stood a few feet away from the subdued, devil ancient cave entrance. Looking at the dark and gloomy cave, a white cold air slowly rose. Under the biting cold Een wind, it did not show any signs of dissipating. That white air gathered more and more, its volume increasing, and finally it gradually condensed into a shape Indistinctly, an enormous figure appeared in the white air. Its roar was deep, bursts of roars, mixed with the whistling of the Yin wind. It increased its power, like a ferocious ghost deity. Jean Pinger looked at that white air, sighed, shook her head, and said, "All right, now you see. There's a powerful and bad-tempered, fierce spirit here." Chapter 376. The Yin wind blew even more fiercely, causing Ghostly and Jean Pinger's clothes to flutter. They stood at the entrance of the subdued, devil ancient cave, looking at the huge and strange ferocious spirit that gradually appeared. The bell-sized eyeballs suddenly opened in the white gas, and there was a faint blood-red light coming out of them. The huge figure of the ferocious spirit shrouded over, and its gaze fell on the two mortals who were standing under it. "Who is it dare to come here?" The ferocious spirit's voice suddenly rang out, vigorous and deafening, as if the surrounding mountain walls were shaking. But after a moment, the ferocious spirit seemed to discover something, was stunned for a moment. His eyes instead turned to Jean Pinger, who was standing slightly behind Ghostly. "It's you again?" Jean Pinger smiled, extremely coquettish, said, "Yes, it's me, we meet again." The ferocious spirit angrily howled. His voice reverberated far away, as if the deep ancient cave behind him was also echoing with his howl. "Why are you here again? Don't you think disturbing the goddess statue the last time was not enough?" Jean Pinger was thinking about how to deal with this ferocious spirit. From the situation that day, this ferocious spirit guarding the subdued, devil ancient cave was definitely not easy to deal with. Just that although she was thinking, her face was still smiling. Jean Pinger was about to speak. Suddenly, Ghostly beside her said, "Are you the Black Tiger of the southern border, 7 heroes who followed Linglong Shaman Lady into the 10,000 Great Mountains?" Jean Pinger was stunned, turned to look at Ghostly, only to see Ghostly's indifferent face, looking at the ferocious spirit's huge figure. And almost at the same time Ghostly asked, that ferocious spirit also involuntarily paused, as if the name Black Tiger, like a heavy punch, struck somewhere deep in his heart. Even if he transformed into a ferocious spirit, even if he was abandoned by the world, waited alone for thousands of years, but ultimately there would still be some memories hidden deep in his heart. "Who are you?" That ferocious spirit's vigorous voice seemed to suddenly turn hoarse, completely different from the scene just now. Ghostly looked at the voice, which was surrounded by eerie, ghostly energy. A complicated glint flashed past his eyes, unhurriedly said, "That year among the 7 who followed Linglong Shaman Lady, the last 5 returned and then established today's southern border 5 tribes. The remaining 2 were Linglong's brothers who had followed her for the longest time, Black Tiger and Blackwood. However, they did not return. According to the ancient legend of the witch tribe, the eldest brother, Black Tiger, is loyal and brave, while the second brother, Blackwood, is persevering and persistent. I saw that you were unusually respectful to this statue of God, and have been so tenacious for thousands of years. You did not regret turning into a ferocious spirit, so I guess that you're a Black Tiger, am I right?" The ferocious spirit was silent for a long time before he stared at Ghostly. Ghostly did not show any fear under that ferocious gaze as he stared back. Slowly, the white ghost energy around the fierce spirit slowly surged. The blood-red color in the fierce spirit's eyes became more and more intense. Even the already bone-chilling entrance of the subdued devil ancient cave, the temperature seemed to become colder. Xiao Hui, who was crouching on Ghostly's shoulder, also seemed uneasy, quietly called out twice, "Who exactly are you?" To know about the past of the witch tribe. The fierce spirit's angry voice seemed to suddenly change, an indescribable coldness in his tone. Ghostly did not seem to feel anything, only looked at that huge shadow and said, "Most of the people in the world cannot remember what happened too long ago, just that eventually there will still be legends passed down bit by bit." He looked at the fierce spirit, said word by word, "Today in the southern border, the descendants of the witch tribe, there are still people who remember you." The fierce spirit's eyes closed and did not open for a long time. Jean Pinger stood behind, frowning slightly, looked at the fierce spirit, and then looked at Ghostly beside her, the so-called ancient which tribe Linglong deity statues and similar legends. She did not know anything about it, but looking at the fierce spirit's reaction, it was obvious that what Ghostly said was actually the truth. All along, she had thought that no one in the evil sect would know more than her about the various strange things in this 10,000 great mountains. Unexpectedly, this Ghostly seemed to be hiding something that no one knew about. She looked at that man's figure. Her heart slightly shivered. Her eyes instead turned colder. After a long time, the Een wind was still blowing coldly. Above her head, the black clouds silently rolled. The cold wind rustled, a desolate scene. In this silence, suddenly that fierce spirit black tiger abruptly lifted its head, faced the sky, and gave a long howl, its voice mournful, as if countless vicissitudes of the past were all in this howl. When that howl was still reverberating faintly in the distant mountains, he had already turned his head back. The rumbling sound seemed to be the agitation of emotions, but in the end, it was suppressed. "Many thanks." That fierce spirit stared at Ghostly for a long time, suddenly lowered his head slightly, and said. Ghostly was expressionless, slowly took half a step back, closed his eyes and bowed slightly, considered returning the greeting. The fierce spirit nodded his head. His voice had already gradually calmed down, said, "Didn't expect that in this world there is still someone who remembers the goddess and us, hey? But when we followed the witch goddess deep into this 10,000 great mountains, how would we have thought of our everlasting fame?" The fierce spirit's eyes slowly turned to the entrance of the subdued devil ancient cave. On that Linglong shaman goddess statue, his eyes instantly turned gentle. Even his voice seemed to be much lighter. "But all of you coming here, I guess it is not specially to say these few words to me, this thing that is neither human nor ghost." Ghostly was silent for a moment, said, "Yes, before I came here, although I had heard of Linglong shaman goddess and the 7 of you, but I did not know your current situation, and also did not know that you would be here." He looked up, looked at the fierce spirit, unhurriedly said, "I am here because of that beast deity in this cave." The fierce spirit's huge figure shook. That name seemed to even make him feel fear. Just that, the fierce spirit's eyes did not look over, still stopped on that statue, said, "What are you looking for him for?" Ghostly indifferently said, "We want to find him and then kill him." That fierce spirit abruptly turned his head, stared at Ghostly, slowly said, "Just with the 2 of you?" Ghostly slowly nodded, said yes. The white ghost energy around the fierce spirit suddenly sped up. His figure also looked blurry. After a long while, he was heard coldly saying, "That's right. The beast deity is indeed in this subdued devil ancient cave." Jean Pinger's body shook. A trace of joy flashed past her face. Ghostly did not show much joy, still looking at that fierce spirit. That fierce spirit was also looking at him, suddenly said, "I see your attire. You should not be a southern border native. From Central Plains, right?" Ghostly nodded, said, "Exactly." The fierce spirit pondered for a moment. In the eerie, ghastly energy, his expression seemed to change, said, "Do you know why I am guarding this cave entrance?" Ghostly said, "I don't know." The fierce spirit said, "Of course it is to protect the goddess statue, but other than that, I am guarding here. 1 is not to allow external forces to revive this evildoer. 2 is also not to allow ignorant people to enter to die. Do you understand?" Ghostly nodded. That fierce spirit smiled bitterly, said, "But I ultimately still failed to live up to the goddess's great trust, was deceived by that beast, made a grave mistake. The evildoer revived the world's people in misery." Speaking till the end, his voice also gradually became softer. Then, the fierce spirit seemed to compose himself, said, "I was already in despair, thinking that there would be no one in the world who could stop this evildoer from harming the common people. Unexpectedly, a while ago, he actually returned with serious injuries. Central Plains is a land of heroes. There was actually a master who could seriously injure him. It was really out of my expectations." The corner of Ghost Lee's eyes twitched slightly, suddenly sneered and said, "You don't have to be too concerned. Although the beast deity was defeated, but the person who defeated him might not be any better." The fierce spirit was slightly surprised, did not know what ghostly meant, but right now he could not be bothered to delve into it. Said, to be able to get rid of this evildoer, naturally it would be the best. I have this intention for no less than thousands of years. Only regret that even when he was not awake that day, I still could not do anything to him. You all are from Central Plains. Maybe you can do it. If you really succeed. That fierce spirit abruptly retracted his ghostly energy, widened his huge eyes, loudly said, I will thank all of you on behalf of the goddess. After speaking, he slowly moved his body, opened up a path, revealing that deep and bottomless ancient cave behind him. Ghostly stared into the depths of the cave, turned and looked deeply at that fierce spirit. That fierce spirit was also staring at him. Ghostly slowly nodded, did not say anything more, slowly walked in. When he passed by the fierce spirit, the monkey Xiao Hui on his shoulder suddenly raised its head, curiously looked at the fierce spirit's huge body. Its 3 eyes did not even blink. That fierce spirit suddenly shouted to Ghostly's back. There is one more thing. You have to be careful. That day the beast deity did not come back alone. Other than the evil beast Tatai beside him, there was another evildoer, highly skilled. You must be careful. Ghostly paused for a moment, said, as far as I know, the 13 evil beasts under him have all been annihilated. That fierce spirit shook his head and said, not one of the 13. Before this, even I have never seen that evildoer. You must be careful. Ghostly slowly nodded, continued to walk deeper into the ancient cave, following which Jean Pinger also slowly followed. 2 human and 1 monkey figures slowly merged into the darkness, swaying forward in the shadows, slowly. Finally, they could no longer be seen. Chapter 377. That fierce spirit's body, ghost energy, also gradually became indistinct, but his huge eyes were staring at the darkness deep inside the cave. Suddenly, he gave a thunderous roar towards the deepest part of the darkness. That wild roar was like a tidal wave that could topple mountains and overturn the seas. Even the piercingly cold Een wind actually flowed backwards. The extremely hard rock walls rumbled, as if the heavens were collapsing and the earth was splitting. In that wild roar, the fierce spirit's huge body slowly disappeared into the darkness. Just that, at the same time the evil spirit disappeared, he did not notice, outside the subdued devil ancient cave, behind that deity statue, a black figure indistinctly flashed. It was Mu who instigated the southern border 5 tribes' internal strife, snatched back the 5 tribes' sacred weapons, and revived the beast deity. The black and baggy long robe, as usual, enveloped Mu's entire body, emitting a cold and gloomy aura. However, within his eyes, there was an extremely complicated expression flickering as he stared at the depths of the subduing devil ancient cave. When that fierce spirit, who was once his big brother, disappeared, he then slowly retracted his gaze, again, landed on that Linglong shaman lady statue beside him. In the rustling wind, he seemed to be muttering, "Lady." At the same time, far away from the scorched black mountain peak where the subdued devil ancient cave was under that vast black forest, a group of several people slowly walked out. The one in front was a beautiful lady dressed in white like snow, in her hand a blue Tanya celestial sword, her face like frost. Her eyes seemed to have some indescribable sorrow and vicissitudes, silently, gazing at the distant scorched black mountain peak, Central Plains, 30 miles outside Hyang City. On the main road, after such a long time, most of the refugees had already returned to their southern hometown. This place was not far from the foot of Chinyan Hill, but from time to time, ragged commoners could be seen trudging with difficulty. But in between, there were already more small merchants and peddlers compared to a few months ago when the calamity happened. It was already much better. Celestial guidance, look at your half-life. Suddenly, a loud shout rang out on the main road, breaking the silence here. It was extremely ear-piercing. Fortune, official fate, marriage, whereabouts, geomancy, physiognomy, fortune-telling, bone-feeling, everything, come. One only costs 5 silvers. It's too cheap. Taniska, with a signboard of Immortal Guide in his hand, walked over in big strides, shouting along the way, attracting the attention of passers-by. Wild Dog Taoist following behind him did not speak. As usual, he carried all the luggage. Instead, Xiao Huan behind him seemed to be taken aback. She raised her head from a black book with wordless cover which she had been reading along the way, somewhat stunned, said, "Grandpa, what did you say just now? How many taels of silver per person?" Tanis Ka turned his head, laughed, looked like an immortal descending from the sky, stretched out 5 fingers, and solemnly said, 5 silvers. Xiao Huan frowned and said, "But yesterday you called for 3 taels of silver. Also, what's going on with you these past few days? 3 days ago, we were still fine as usual, charging 5 silver coins per customer. But look at you. These past few days, you've been jumping up and up. From 5 silver coins to 1 tael. 1 day later, it became 2 taels. The day before, it became 3 taels. Today, you just directly asked for 5 taels." Xiao Huan walked to Zhou Yixian's side, carefully assessed Zhou Yixian from head to toe. Zhou Yixian felt goosebumps from her stare, took a step back, coughed dryly, and said, "You little girl, what are you looking at?" Xiao Huan ignored him, stretched out her hand towards Zhou Yixian's forehead. Zhou Yixian was startled, stepped back again, said, "Why are you being so mysterious?" Xiao Huan spat and said, "You are the one who is mysterious. I am checking if you are feverish, your brain is burnt and muddled." Speaking, she turned her head and asked Wild Dog Taoist, who was following behind, "Priest, do you think my grandfather has been muddle-headed recently?" Because it was daytime, Wild Dog Taoist, as usual, had a cloth wrapped around his face, but his eyes were glistening very bright. Right now, being asked by Xiao Huan, he laughed twice, and then immediately nodded and said, I mean senior is old, inevitably a little bullshit." Tanis Ka jumped up in front, raged. Xiao Huan rolled her eyes at him, said, "Grandpa, why are you so agitated? I feel what Taoist priest said is very reasonable. Looking at you these few days, I'm afraid you are really muddled." Tanis Ka seemed to especially hate hearing the words muddled, became even angrier, angrily said, "What do you two know? How old are you two? How much do you know about the ways of the world?" "I am still," Xiao Huan interrupted. "Is that so? Then tell us, why are you trying so hard to raise the price?" Tanis Ka snorted, waved the bamboo pole in his hand, pointed to the sparse passers-by, said, "Look at these people, and those we met along the way, are they all refugees?" Xiao Huan nodded, said, "That's right, everyone is, including us too." Tanis Ka paused, his old face slightly blushed, then pretended not to hear. Xiao Huan continued, "Since they are all refugees far away from their homes, I think not many of them are thinking about physiognomy. I was still thinking if I should reduce the price, but Grandpa, you are good, desperately raising the price." Tanis Ka clasped his hands behind, placed the bamboo pole behind him, sneered, and said, "According to what you said, I am wrong. But look at these few days, the number of people looking for fortune-telling is less or more." Xiao Huan was startled, frowned. Wild Dog Taoist interrupted, said, "Speaking of which, it seems that these few days the number of people looking for fortune-telling is really more." Tanis Ka snorted again, a proud look on his face, said to Xiao Huan, "You are so young, what do you know? Let me tell you, in a calamity, everyone has to leave their homes. There may not be any intention of fortune-telling. But this time it is very different. The calamity is so great, rarely seen in 10,000 years. The world is in misery. Everyone is in danger. Who knows if they will still be alive tomorrow? Under this strange phenomenon, with me as a celestial to guide them, won't everyone rush like a flock of ducks?" Xiao Huan lowered her head and pondered. After a long time, slowly shook her head and sighed, a trace of confusion on her face. Wild Dog Taoist was still puzzled, couldn't help, but said, "Then why do you keep raising the price of fortune-telling?" Tanis Ka rolled his eyes, said, "This kind of profound knowledge, how can I teach you?" Wild Dog Taoist was rebuffed, mumbled and shrank back. Xiao Huan beside him sighed and said, "This I more or less understand now." Both Wild Dog Taoist and Tanis Ka were shocked. Tanis Ka said, "Oh, why don't you say it?" Xiao Huan shrugged her shoulders, indifferently said, Nothing more than you have predicted that the people of the world are in a state of panic, unable to care about their own lives. How many would care about their worldly possessions? On the contrary, the higher you raise the price, the more the common people would think that this person's cultivation is profound, extraordinary. I initially did not believe all these, thought this kind of little trick, even an idiot would be able to see through it. Unexpectedly, there's still so many people who could not see through it. Taniska shook his head, said, "You are wrong, Xiao Huan." Xiao Huan was stunned, said, "What?" Taniska said, "What you said before is right. Only the last sentence. It is not that they could not see through it. It is just that they themselves could not see through it." Wild Dog Taoist was confused, said, "What could not see through it?" Taniska glanced at the people who were staggering around, said, "The common people of the world. How can they all be stupid, just that at the juncture of life and death, not knowing how many people are not willing to believe in themselves, would rather listen to the comfort of others?" I pointed out the right path for them. What I said, most of them were talking about the later half of their lives, will be much better than today's situation. With these words, they will be at ease after paying the money. Xiao Huan suddenly said, "Grandpa, did you really said it from physiognomy, or are you talking nonsense to them?" Taniska smiled, said, "I am talking nonsense." Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist looked at each other, speechless for a moment. Taniska looked up at the sky, looked at the distant firmament, gazed for a long time, leisurely said, "Such a catastrophe can only happen once but not twice, or else Heaven Tao will not tolerate it." Speaking till here, he turned back and smiled. "Since it is so, the future days will naturally be much better than the present days of not knowing life and death. I am not a liar, right? On the contrary, along the way, I have comforted and advised countless of people who were homeless and miserable, and countless of them, under my words, were reborn, the dead embers were rekindled. This merit, how can those monks and Taoists who stay in the temple all day chanting sutras achieve it?" He stretched out his hand and patted Xiao Huan's head. His face was celestial, righteous, full of the old man's feelings of bemoaning the state of the universe and saving the world, going down to hell alone to save the common people. Even if he took this much shining white silver, it was also a righteous cause. If he did not take it, he would not be able to save the people. If he took it, it was the righteous vicissitudes of great mercy and great sorrow. He then sighed and said, "Life is really lonely." For a moment, there was no sound. All was silent. Taniska frowned, retracted his gaze from the high firmament, lowered his head, and looked around. "Hey, you two, why are you walking so fast?" Chapter 378. Qingyan Hill, Tongtian Peak. In the Crystal Hall, the solemn scene in the past seemed to have changed on this day. Chaotic footsteps were heard incessantly outside the Crystal Hall. Suppressed but panicked whispers spread out like water ripples. In the distance, there seemed to be noises. In the past, it was unimaginable that it would happen openly on Tongtian Peak, and right now, the noises seemed to be getting louder and louder, and it was approaching the Crystal Hall. The Crystal Hall's terrain was extremely high, towering above the sea of clouds. Even after crossing the Rainbow Bridge, from the stone steps beside the pool, it would still take a while, but from a volume of the noises, most likely it was already halfway up the stone steps. The eldest disciple of Tongtian Peak, Xiao Yikai, who heard the news and rushed over, with a few junior brothers clustered around him, walked quickly into the Crystal Hall. His handsome face, for some reason, revealed some tiredness, not knowing what exactly it was that could make this highly skilled Qing Yun sect younger generation outstanding talent put in so much effort. But although he looked tired, when Xiao Yikai walked into the main hall, his face was still solemn, his brows frowned. Slightly angry, said, "What is going on? Still think it is not troublesome enough. Who is so daring to make a ruckus here?" Beside, a few young disciples were guarding the main hall entrance hurriedly walked over. Reverend Daoxian, ever since the battle with the beast deity, had been in seclusion for a long time, and his temper unbelievably became eccentric. All the affairs of Tongtian Peak, big and small, were mostly handled by this senior brother, who was highly regarded by the masses. In the eyes of the young disciples, they were also in awe of Xiao Yikai. Just that right now the noises were still getting louder, but most of the young disciples had a strange look on their faces. One of them went up to Xiao Yikai, lowered his voice and said, "Xiao Senior Brother, it is Big Bamboo Valley Su Teacher Uncle who is here." Xiao Yikai was stunned, said in astonishment, "Suru, Su Teacher Uncle?" Everyone beside nodded. Xiao Yikai said in surprise, "What is she doing here? Since she is here, why did she not inform anyone, and even create such a ruckus?" Before he finished, the clamor outside the crystal hall suddenly increased, as if someone had finally lost his patience. A clear whistle was heard from afar, like a phoenix cry, leisurely rising. Xiao Yikai's expression changed, hurriedly walked towards the crystal hall entrance, saying, "Oh no, quickly go. Wait, Xiao Junior Brother, Su Junior Brother, both of you immediately go to the backyard. Invite a few teacher uncles over to dissuade Su Teacher Uncle. We are all juniors, it's not good to talk, quickly go." The two young disciples at the side hurriedly nodded, turned, and ran towards the rear hall of the crystal hall. Xiao Yikai strode towards the entrance of Crystal Hall. When he was about to reach the entrance, that clear whistling sound suddenly became urgent, emitting a sharp sound. Xiao Yikai's face turned pale. His figure flashed and floated towards the door. At the same time, he shouted in a deep voice, "Marshal Uncle Su, we can talk things out. Please don't." Before he could finish his sentence, sounds of "Aya, Aya" were suddenly heard. Xiao Yikai's figure stopped, abruptly stopped. At the huge entrance of the crystal hall, under the background of the warm and clear blue sky, several figures fell in from outside the hall. None of them were able to stand steadily. Each and every one of them spun nonstop, and after a while they all fell to the ground. The crystal hall was in an uproar. "Hey!" A cold snort, a slender figure, appeared at the entrance of the crystal hall. It was Suru. This sound instantly stunned the entire place. In the huge crystal hall, there was not a single sound. Everyone's gazes were gathered on that lady who suddenly showed her might. Her glossy black hair was coiled up in a bun, inserted diagonally with a red jade golden phoenix spreading wings hairpin. 3 glazed jade bells dangling from the phoenix's mouth, gently swaying. 2 willowy eyebrows, cold with a hint of glamour, clear with even more charm. Red lips tightly shut, cheeks like snow, a pair of clear eyes with some anger. The usual loose clothes that she usually wore were gone. Right now, Suru was dressed in plain clothes, tightly wrapped around her body. Less charm, more passion. At the same time, she was holding a dark green celestial sword in its scabbard. The sword light was dazzling. Although the scabbard was outside, but layers of sword energy, formless and pervaded, made one feel that this celestial sword had a spirit, as if it wanted to leap out by itself and wantonly brandish. The corner of Xiao Yikai's eyes twitched a few times. Subconsciously, he felt a chill on his back. Suru's face was like frost, her eyes cold, swept across the crowd in the crystal hall. Under that glance, although her face was beautiful, but no one dared to look at her. From the corner of his eyes, Xiao Yikai glanced at the young disciples who were groaning and slowly crawling up from the ground. Although they were bruised and swollen, their injuries were only superficial. Not to mention injuries to the tendons and bones, it was rare to see blood. With this look, his heart calmed down a lot. It seemed that this Suru teacher ant, although for some reason, suddenly unleashed her thunderous might, but in the end she was still mindful of their sect ties and did not do anything ruthless, if not according to what those elders had said in the past. That woman is really powerful. These sect junior brothers would most likely suffer even more. Just that even so, Xiao Yikai suddenly felt a chill in his eyes. It was Suru's gaze that finally landed on him. Xiao Yikai laughed dryly, took a step forward, cupped his hands in salute, at the same time secretly glanced at the dark green celestial sword in Suru's hand, said, "This, Su teacher Aunt Y is so free today to come to our Tongtian Peak." Suru coldly looked at Xiao Yikai, coldly snorted, completely ignored Xiao Yikai's question, did not have any intention of returning Xiao Yikai's salute, still arrogantly standing there. Her pretty face frosty, coldly said, "Less nonsense, call Daoxian out for me." Once the words were spoken, A commotion broke out among the near 100 Tongtian Peak disciples in the Crystal Hall. Xiao Yikai's expression also changed. Stunned for a long while, said, "Su teacher, aunt, don't tell me something happened?" "Teacher, he has always been in seclusion." "Right. Where's Tian teacher uncle? Why didn't he come with you?" It would have been better if he did not mention Tian Bui. Once the words came out, Suru's expression immediately changed. The expression on her face fluctuated, 3 parts sadness, 3 parts anxiety, and even at 3 parts anger and a trace of icy cold, murderous intent. Roar. Suddenly, a low roar like a wild beast's roar came out from this crystal hall. Everyone was shocked. Then, they discovered that the strange sound actually came from the strange black-green sword in Suru's hand. Suru's 5 fingers that held the sword were pale, and her slender knuckles were even bloodless from the force she used. As if she also sensed something, the sword light on the sword was already bright, and at that moment, it became even brighter and actually let out a sound like a wild beast's roar. Such an immortal sword that possessed a powerful and extremely unyielding, imposing aura actually didn't have the slightest feeling of being out of place when held in the hands of Suru, a woman that usually seemed to be gentle and amiable. Instead, it was like adding wings to a tiger, and it increased the scene of its killing intent. Xiao Yikai subconsciously took a step back, his scalp tingling, did not know where he said the wrong thing. And this was his senior teacher uncle, and her husband Tian Bui was Qin Yun Sek's big Bamboo Valley leader with high authority. No matter what, he could not easily offend her. Logically speaking, Suru trespassing into Crystal Hall was already a big mistake, but looking at Suru's expression, there was not the slightest trace of fear. Clearly she not only wanted to create trouble, and the trouble was going to be a big one. In the dark green celestial sword's strange and deep low roar, Suru faced Xiao Yikai, coldly said word by word, called Daoxian out. I want to ask him properly. What exactly did he do to Bui? Xiao Yikai's body shook greatly. Abruptly looked up. The crowd in Crystal Hall instantly became silent. And at this moment, suddenly a burst of hurried footsteps were heard from the rear hall. An old voice was heard from afar. "Suru, junior sister, did something happen to Bui, junior brother? If there is something we can talk about it. We are all from Qin Yun sect. You must not act recklessly." Following the voice, a number of elders filed out from the rear hall. The 2 in front, one had black hair, one had white hair, both had white beards. But the old voice was the black-haired elder, and the white-bearded elder was the 7 Peaks martial competition on Mount Qin Yun, Elder Fong, who was the judge of the martial competition when Sha Danan was still in Mount Qin Yun. Qin Yun's sect, in these 10 years, had experienced 2 great wars and catastrophes. The previous generation of elders were either dead or injured. The number of people was also not many. Suru watched those few elders walking over, frowned, snorted coldly, but still did not have any intention to restrain herself. That white-bearded Elder Fong elder glanced at Suru, coughed once. His mouth instead muttered a few words. The black-haired elder beside looked around, saw several young disciples with bruised noses and swollen faces. He frowned, was about to speak to Suru. Suru instead coldly said to that Fong elder, "Fan senior brother, are you scolding me?" Fong elder was glared at by her, blushed but immediately shook his head, said, "Not at all, Suka junior sister. I and you and Bui junior brother have been friends for so many years. I can't even admire you enough. Why would I scold you?" That black-haired elder turned back and glanced at Fong elder, frowned. Fong elder laughed dryly, made a hand gesture, said, "Yang senior brother, you speak, you speak." The black-haired elder, who was addressed as Yang senior brother, turned his head, spoke to Su junior sister. "All right, first calm down. What exactly happened, tell me. You are usually a cautious and gentle person. Why did you do today what even Bui junior brother might not dare to do?" Suru's face was still cold, but the celestial sword light in her hand slowly weakened, and no longer emitted that low and strange roar. The crowd quietly heaved a sigh of relief when Suru stood there with the celestial sword in her hand. The power was so great, ordinary Qin Yun disciples were really alarmed. Suru looked at Yang elder. The corner of her mouth moved, coldly smiled, and said, "What Bui does not dare to do, doesn't mean I do not dare to do. I want to see Daoxian, ask him out. The few elders looked at each other for a moment. Young elder coughed once, said, Su Junior's sister, sect head senior brother, is in seclusion for many days. It is really inconvenient for him to come out. You better first tell us what made you so angry. And Tian Junior brother, what exactly happened to him? Why is he not with you? Suru's willowy eyebrows frowned. The anger in her elegant beauty increased. Loudly said, Isn't he still detained by your Tongtian Peak? Once she said that, young elder, Feng elder, and everyone on Tongtian Peak's faces changed greatly. Young elder hurriedly said, Su Junior sister, you must not speak carelessly about this matter. Tian Junior brother is the head of Qing Yun's 7 branches. In our Qing Yun sect, other than Daoxian sect head senior brother, and Xing Shuchang senior brother are the most respected. Moreover, we are all disciples of the same sect. How can there be such a thing as detention? It is impossible. Chapter 379. Suru sneered, sternly said, Don't think we don't know what happened to Daoxian senior brother. It is because we know the implications. Bui was willing to take the risk, went up the mountain to advise him. But this time, there is still no news. If I don't come to ask for him, who should I look for? Young elder was stunned. Feng elder, who was standing aside, suddenly turned to Xiao Yikai and said, Xiao teacher nephew, Big Bamboo Valley head Tian Bui, did he come to Tongtian Peak recently? Xiao Yikai blankly shook his head, said, No, disciple has always been in charge of Tongtian Peak's affairs. But these few months, Tian teacher uncle really did not report to come up to Tongtian Peak. Suru glanced at Feng elder, coldly said, What do you think he came for? Would he send an invitation to pay a visit and slowly wait for tea? Feng elder blushed, did not speak. Young elder was already speaking to Xiao Yikai. Xiao teacher nephew, since it is so, immediately go to Founder's Ancestral Hall at the back of the mountain and ask sect head senior brother, if possible, it is best to invite him here. Everyone can speak face to face, then everyone will understand. Xiao Yikai hesitated for a moment, nodded, said, All right, I will go now. After speaking, he turned and quickly walked to the back hall, sped away. Young elder watched after Xiao Yikai's figure disappeared, turned around, smiled, and said, Su Junior sister, I also know you have a deep relationship between husband and wife. Under your concern, it is inevitable that your heart is in a mess. But this time you barged into Crystal Hall so rashly. It is really too much. Suru was silent for a moment, lightly said, Young senior brother, what you said is right. Later, if Bi really is not a big deal, just me suspecting a ghost, Suru will naturally accept Qing Yun's sex punishment. Young elder waved his hand, smiled, and said, Look at you, I did not mean that. Suru changed the topic, cut him off decisively. But if something really happens to Bui on this Tongtian Peak, Yang senior brother, her clear, bright eyes glinted, a glint flashed past. Her words were, like her agitated emotions and determination, without the slightest wavering or turning back. Then in 2,000 years in Qing Yun's sect, there will be an unfilial disciple, Suru, for the person whom she longs for all her life. On this Qing Yun Hill Tongtian Peak, ask for an explanation from the generations of founders, to that renowned sect head senior brother. With a light shout, she waved her hand like a knife, cutting through the wind. The dark green sword light instantly shone brightly, and a sharp whistling sound rose from the ground, followed by a muffled sound. Dust swayed in the air, but everyone only felt a slight tremor under their feet, as if there was an earthquake. When the dust settled, the dark green celestial sword in Suru's hand was already inserted into the hard stone slab in the middle of the Crystal Hall main hall, and the area where it was inserted into the ground, there was not a single crack. In the darkness, that dark green celestial sword in the ground, although had left Suru's hand, but the sword light's force seemed to be even more intense, like a ferocious beast licking blood. Another low roar. That Yang senior brother looked at that dark green, celestial sword in front of him, and Suru, with a bitter laugh, said, Su Junior sister, this has not reached that stage yet. Why did you still take out the ink snow, which has been sealed for more than 100 years? Suru sneered and said, Yang senior brother, you know it was Bui who wanted me to seal this ink snow, because with him around, so be it, I don't care. But if anything happens to him, I will use this ink snow to seek guidance from sect head senior brother. Young elder shook his head with a bitter laugh, said, I thought you and Tion junior brother have been married for many years. You have long changed this temperament. Forget it, forget it. Anyway, I can't persuade you. We better go over and sit. Wait together for Xiao Ikai to invite sect head senior brother over. Suru was expressionless, only snorted, slowly walked to the side with young elder, and sat down. In the crystal hall, the atmosphere slowly eased. Young elder lowered his voice, whispered something to Suru. Most likely he was still consoling Suru not to be too anxious. The other elders either stood behind young elder or also sat down. Only that Fong elder slowly walked to the side of the crystal hall door, far away from Suru. As for the other young disciples, their status was not high enough. In addition with Suru's anger, each stood further away than the other. Among the Tongtian Peak elders, this Fong elder was usually the most easygoing. He was also rather funny and humorous, although his skills inevitably fell behind these elders. But among the young disciples, he was the most popular, whether it was his own disciples or not. The other disciples were all very close to him. At this moment, the crowd saw Fong elder standing alone at the side. Many of the younger generation disciples quietly went over. Among them, there were a few who were thrown in by Suru and were also Fong elder's disciples at the same time. Fong elder looked at those few disciples, shook his head. A young disciple beside him could not help but quietly asked, Teacher, that Su teacher uncle, why is so fierce? Usually she looks very gentle. Why is she so fierce when she is fierce? White-bearded Fong elder rolled his eyes at that disciple with a hey sound, blew his beard, said, You guys had just entered Qingyun sect for how long? What do you know? When that woman was shrewish, what can she not do? The surrounding young disciples slowly gathered. One by one, listened attentively. Someone softly said, Can't tell. Su teacher uncle with such looks must be a heavenly beauty at that time. Fong elder giggled, secretly glanced at Suru and young elder, saw that they were talking, obviously did not notice the young disciples. He immediately became bolder, said, Speaking of which, she was considered the most famous female disciple in our Qingyun sect in this generation. Just like, he nodded, his face suddenly revealed a mysterious smile, lowered his voice, and said, Just like small bamboo valleys loose swecky now. The surrounding disciples all made a sound. All of them looked like they were suddenly enlightened. One after another nodded, indicating that they had understood Fong elder's meaning. Elder Fong's call was answered by hundreds of people. Couldn't help but feel proud, said, Actually, speaking of which, although her skills were not bad, but there are still people stronger than her, like Daoxian senior brother and Wan's senior brother. They are rare talents that appear once in 1,000 years. Naturally, they are stronger than her. Just that everyone saw that she was young and beautiful. Plus, she had her teacher Jinyu Master as her backing. Nobody dared to offend her. That was why she dared to create trouble everywhere. I still remember, at that time she alone caused chaos in Qingyun sect, plus the tigress Shuiwe, who was almost as ferocious as her. Brat, why did you hit me? Be honest, I am not finished yet. Fong elder was excited, continued. That Shuiwe at that time, why are you all having this expression? Oh, I know, you all don't understand who I'm talking about. Actually, it is that small bamboo valley, Shuiwe master. She is Suru's senior sister. That ferocious character at that time was the same as Suru, famous in our Qingyun sect. Hey, brat, why are you always pulling me? Let me tell you, no matter what, I'm still your teacher. Don't be so unruly. And where's I just now? Oh, I remember, we were talking about Shuiwe. That Suru, although at that time was ferocious, dared to do anything, but after marrying Big Bamboo Valley's Tian Bui, she seemed to have changed into another person, which is the way you all used to see. Us few old fellows actually also felt it was very strange, but at least it is still a good thing. But speaking about that Shuiwe, she did not change at all. How ferocious she was at that time. Now she is still that ferocious, even the disciples that she taught. Let's take your favorite Lu Sweki, for example, almost exactly the same as her at that time. What the hell? Fong elder abruptly turned around, angrily said, Brat, why are you always pulling me? Haven't been beaten for a long time. Your skin is itching. His words abruptly cut off, slightly opened his mouth, saw a circle of young disciples standing at the side with their heads bowed, not making a sound, not moving at all. Outside the Crystal Hall entrance, Shui Master's face was indifferent, coldly standing there looking at Fong Elder. Beside her, Wen Min was also looking at Fong Elder, but her face was full of anger. Fong Elder's forehead was instantly full of sweat. His old face flushed red, stepped back a few steps, extremely embarrassed, bitterly smiling. Shui Master unhurriedly walked in, but did not look at Fong Elder again. Instead, Wen Min was unwilling, fiercely stared at him a few times. Fong Elder, among these Qing elders, had always been known to be talkative. This time he was caught red-handed. The scene was extremely embarrassing. But Suru and Yang Elder clearly still did not know what exactly happened here. Suru saw that Shui Master was unexpectedly here. A trace of surprise flashed past her face, stood up, said, "Senior sister, why are you here?" Shui Master frowned slightly, glanced around, said, "I want to ask you first. You're not at Big Bamboo Valley. Why did you come to Tong Tian Peak alone? If there's something, it should be Tian Bui. Why are you here?" The corner of Suru's mouth moved, looked at her senior sister. Suddenly her heart ached. Her eyes actually reddened a few degrees. Shui Master was surprised. A trace of uneasiness flashed past her heart, and looked at Yang Elder beside. Yang Elder shook his head with a bitter smile. For a moment, did not know what to say. Shui Master felt slightly anxious. She and Suru grew up together. The friendship between them was not ordinary, really like blood sisters. This time, looking at Suru, it seemed like something really happened. She was even more worried. The corner of her eyes flashed, saw that dark green celestial sword that Suru stabbed into the ground. This shock was even more extraordinary. Just when she was about to ask Suru, suddenly a flurry of footsteps was heard from the rear hall. Xiao Yikai, like a whirlwind, swept in. His face was filled with a rarely seen panic. Something happened. Something happened. Everyone in the Crystal Hall was shocked. Suru was like being struck by 5 thunders. Only felt a boom sound in her head. The shock made her dizzy. That worry which had been swirling in her heart almost shattered, but she felt her vision turning black, almost fainted. Shui Master supported the extremely pale Suru, turned to Xiao Yikai and shouted, "What is it? Tell me clearly." Chapter 380. Qing Yun Hill Founders Ancestral Hall was still shrouded in the green pines and cypresses, the huge figure indistinctly visible. Just at this silence was soon broken by chaotic footsteps. A large group of Qing Yun sect people, one after another, rushed to this sacred place to worship the past generations of Qing Yun ancestors. Looking from the outside, everything seemed to be as tranquil as usual, but when they reached the Founders' Ancestral Hall, whether it was the puzzled Tongtian Peak disciples or the anxious Suru, they all stopped in shock. The Ancestral Hall, surrounded by green pines and cypresses, the solemn and solemn Founders' sacred place. Right now, everywhere was scattered with broken wood and debris, utter chaos. The huge Ancestral Hall, the original red lacquer door, was completely smashed. Even the door's shape was unrecognizable. In front of everyone was an even larger and glaring, hideous hole. On the outer walls of the Founders' Ancestral Hall, almost all of the windows had fallen. Innumerable big and small holes appeared on the walls. The solemn Ancestral Hall was already riddled with thousands of holes, a tragic sight to behold. Only the darkness in the depths of the Ancestral Hall seemed to ignore the faint light seeping in from the fallen windows and the innumerable holes, gently pervading the Ancestral Hall. "Bye!" Suru was the first to react. She could not be bothered to find out why the Founders' Ancestral Hall had such a huge change. With a flash, she dashed in, hoping to see the person she wanted to see. Shui Master, Yang Elder, Fong Elder, and the rest also followed in. Inside, the Founders' Ancestral Hall seemed to be the same as the outside, suffered a huge impact. Everything that once had a solemn atmosphere was destroyed. The flat stone slabs cracked. The huge glass oil bottles were also broken. Even when they walked to the most sacred place, behind the huge altar table that was split into 2, the countless Qing Yun sect ancestors' memorial tablets that were worshipped were scattered all over the ground. At a glance, not knowing how many memorial tablets were split into two by some kind of mysterious force, or even more. Just that, other than this mess, they could not see a single person. Suru's face was pale, her body wobbling. Shuiwa Master frowned, stepped forward, hugged her, softly consoled her, then turned and spoke to Xiao Yikai behind them. What is going on here? And where is Daoxian's senior brother? Xiao Yikai's face was bitter. Until now, the astonished expression had not faded. Said, reporting to Shi Shu, when disciple just came here, what I saw was this scene. As for teacher, for this 1 month, he has been meditating in the founder's ancestral hall almost every day. Disciple really can't think, other than here, where else did he go? The worry in Shuiwa Master's eyes grew heavier. She wanted to speak, but stopped. At this moment, suddenly a light sound was heard from the side. Everyone present were highly skilled. Almost immediately heard this sound. Someone's there. Elder Yang quickly determined that the voice came from behind the broken, huge offering table. Suru, who was completely powerless, was shocked. A trace of joy flashed in her eyes. She stood up straight, called out, Bui, is that you? Some of the disciples had already ran over, worked together to flip the offering table over. That offering table was passed down from which generation of founders? It was huge and thick, incomparably heavy. Those few disciples, although also had some skills, but still needed a few of them to work together before they could strenuously flip the table over. After flipping it over, as expected under the debris, a figure appeared, at the same time, making a low groan. The crowd was overjoyed, crowded over, but after a moment, they were stunned. That person was not Tian Bui, also not Qingyun sect head Reverend Daoxian, but that Long Shou Valley disciple who had been keeping vigil in the founder's ancestral hall. Half of his clothes were dyed red with blood. It was obvious that he was also injured, and his injuries were not light. His face was also extremely pale, as if he was still unconscious. He did not respond at all to the person kneeling beside him and calling out to him. The joy on Suru's face slowly disappeared, and then was replaced by even greater worry and anxiety. Master Shuai stood beside her, gently consoling her. Elder Yang's face was ashen, looked around. Qing Yun Sect Founder's Ancestral Hall was one of the most important places in Qing Yun Sect, almost comparable to the illusory moon cave. This time it was reduced to such a scene. It was really something that had never happened in 1,000 years. And more importantly, the two most important people in Qing Yun Sect seemed to have disappeared. Xiao, teacher nephew. Elder Yang turned and looked at Xiao Yikai, said, Are you sure Sect Head Senior Brother is here? Xiao Yikai looked at the unconscious Lin Jingyu. His face slowly calmed down. After a moment of silence, said, Yes, these few days, teacher is indeed only in this founder's ancestral hall. Usually when disciples have any matters to consult or report to him, it is also here. Elder Yang was clearly distraught. For a moment, he did not know what to do. Xiao Yikai coughed twice, slowly walked towards Elder Yang, lowered his voice, softly said, Yang teacher uncle, this matter should not be dragged on. So many junior brothers gathered here, seeing the sacred ancestral hall damaged. It will do more harm than good. And from what Surusu teacher uncle said, teacher in Big Bamboo Valley Tian Bui Tian teacher uncle seemed to have a secret. I'm afraid it has something to do with what happened here. Why don't we let them leave first, then we decide one by one. What do you think? Elder Yang came to his senses, nodded his head, and then said, I can't really do these things. Sect Head Senior Brother has always trusted you. Usually it is also you who take care of everything. Now you just have to act according to the situation. After speaking, he shook his head and sighed, walked to the side, and discussed quietly with white-beard Elder Fong who was standing beside. Xiao Yikai nodded to Elder Yang, considered to have accepted the order, then turned around, in a clear voice said, Various teacher uncles, various junior brothers, recently Founder's Ancestral Hall has met with a great calamity. I'm afraid there are external enemies invading. That's why they are here. As the saying goes, to mend the pen after the sheep are lost. We cannot sit still and await death. Speaking until here, his brows raised, spoke to one of the Tongtian Peak disciples beside him. Qin Junior Brother, you bring 10 people, immediately go to the outer perimeter of Founder's Ancestral Hall and guard. No one is allowed to enter in case there are still enemies hiding inside after discovering them. Quickly inform me at the front of the mountain. A tall man walked out from the Tongtian Peak disciples, cupped his hands together, and solemnly said, "Yes." After speaking, he turned around and signaled to his left and right, and immediately walked out in quick steps. Right now, the Founder's Ancestral Hall had quieted down. Only Xiao Yikai stood in the middle, although there were a few elders whose seniority was higher than him. But right now, he seemed to be the backbone of Qingyun's sect. Xiao Yikai said again, "Chang Jr. brother, here." A person walked out, his face firm and determined. It was Chang Jian, who had brought Zhang Xiaofan and the rest of the mountain for a martial arts tournament, and had a battle with Big Bamboo Valley senior disciple Xavion. Xiao Yikai nodded, said, "Chang Jr. brother, the most important thing now is to find teacher. With him presiding over the situation, there is nothing to be afraid of. Although there seems to be something big happening here. But teacher's skills are divine. Invincible, ordinary evildoers will not be able to harm him. You bring 80 people. No, the more the better. You bring 150 people. Search from Tongtian Peak from top to bottom. The front and back of the mountain must be searched, must not miss any clue." Chang Jian's face was deeply worried. Clearly he knew that although Xiao Yikai's words at the beginning were pleasant to hear, but the most important was the last sentence. Without hesitation, he replied in a deep voice and quickly called the crowd, walked out. Looking at the number of people, it was obviously not enough to meet the number Xiao Yikai mentioned. Most likely they still had to go to the front of the mountain to deploy the troops. After this large group of people left, the Founder's Ancestral Hall immediately became empty. Roughly there were only a few elders and Xiao Yikai, and one Min who was following behind Shuiwa Master, and finally the still unconscious Lin Jingyu. Xiao Yikai sighed, turned and bowed to the elders, quietly said, "Dear teacher uncles, today Qingyun's sect has a big change again. Disciple acted rashly. If there is anything inappropriate, please punish me." Suru and Shuiwa Master did not speak. Young elder nodded, said, "Xiao teacher nephew, you don't have to be humble. You did very well just now. Now what else do the few of us old men need to do? Just tell us. Don't stand on ceremony." Xiao Yikai pondered for a moment, said, "Now the situation is unclear. We still need to be cautious. Dear teacher uncles, please return to your own mountain. If anything happens, at least you can take care of your own sect. Just a pity this Dragonhead Valley Lin Jr. brother is still unconscious. If not, we can ask him. I'm afraid we will know everything. After all, he was the only one present at that time." Everyone frowned. All of them were preoccupied. Suru, right now, under Shuiwa Master's consolation, also slowly calmed down. After all, Tianbui was not around, although worried, but there was still hope, so she was not that nervous. Listening to Xiao Yikai's instructions, her heart was in a mess, only hoped that Tianbui would be fine. And at this moment, her eyes swept past Lin Jingyu, who was lying on the ground, suddenly frowned, quietly exclaimed, "E." Shuiwa Master stood beside her, slightly surprised, said, "What is it?" Chapter 381. Suru pointed at Lin Jingyu, said, "He seems to have something in his hand." Everyone was shocked. Xiao Yikai quickly walked to Bei's side, gently flipped his body over, as expected. In his right hand that was pressed under his body was a rectangular black wooden board tightly gripped. Xiao Yikai stretched out his hand to take it. Unexpectedly, after pulling, the wooden board did not move at all, although Lin Jingyu was unconscious, but for some reason, this wooden board was tightly gripped and did not loosen at all. Everyone looked at it, puzzled. Fong Elder walked to the side, turned one round, suddenly said, "This wooden board seems to be the ancestral memorial tablet." Shuiwa Master looked intently, nodded and said, "That's right. It is the memorial tablet." Xiao Yikai spent a long time, then slowly pried open Lin Jingyu's tightly gripped fingers, took out this tablet, which seemed to be extremely important to him. Everyone crowded over. As the witness of this incident, Lin Jingyu being so concerned about this tablet, obviously it was related to it. Unexpectedly, with one look, everyone was stunned and looked at each other. Although this spirit tablet was the same size as the other spirit tablets, and was also painted black, On the surface of the spirit tablet, that could still be considered complete, there was not a single word. It was a wordless spirit tablet. Then for it to be placed in this solemn and respectful founder's ancestral hall, whose spirit tablet was it worshipped? And who was it that placed it together with the past generations of ancestors to enjoy incense? Since it was placed there, why not write a name? Lin Jingyu gripped this wooden tablet tightly, refused to let go even when he was seriously injured and unconscious. What did it mean? All kinds of doubts, thousands of thoughts, seemed to be lingering in everyone's hearts. Southern border, 10,000 great mountains, subdue, devil, ancient cave. Legend was a very strange thing. First, legend itself did not seem to be reliable. Just because some things seemed to have a reason to be passed down, people would pass it down by word of mouth, or perhaps some scholars would write it down and pass it down. Secondly, the longer the legend was passed down, often the legend itself would gradually change. The people and events of that year would gradually become unrecognizable under the innumerable embellishments and the passage of time. Who would still remember the truth of that year? And who would still care? Thus, the legend finally became a legend, just like how the beautiful and gentle woman who could topple cities slowly changed her appearance in the passage of time. Thousands of years later, will you still be able to recognize me? In the darkness, the chilly wind seemed to have stopped. It was wild and unbridled, as if it only belonged to the world outside the ancient cave. And in this dark world, everything was quiet. This was the deepest part of the subdue, devil, ancient cave, the place where Black would retrieve the southern border 5 tribes' sacred weapon and revive the beast deity's body, was here. However, at this moment, the demonic aura that was once boiling and surging had already disappeared without a trace. What was left was only silence and the occasional low panting. It was panting, coming from the deepest part of the darkness. A bewitching dark red light shone in this dark and somewhat empty space. A low growl suddenly rang out from the depths of the darkness, right where the panting came from. It was like a ferocious beast with a strong sense of uneasiness in its ferocity, and even some audible fear. It bared its fangs and angrily glared at the red light. The low panting stopped, as if something had appeased that strange beast in the darkness. The growl gradually quietened down and finally disappeared. The cave resumed its silence. Only that strange dark red light was still flickering incessantly. Suddenly, a female voice, melodious but seemingly without any emotions, faintly reverberated in the cave. That Tao-Tai of yours seems to not have a good impression of me all along. This space in the darkness seemed to be really big. That female voice also seemed to travel very far, drifting here and there, empty, just that the source of the voice was right behind that dark red light. Responding to the voice was a calm laughter. You don't have to mind. It has never believed humans. That female snorted, said, "Why? So it has already regarded me as a human." Roar. A low roar swept through the air in an instant. In front of that dark red flame, a ball of flame suddenly lit up. It turned out to be a simple and unsophisticated brazier. It had 3 legs and was covered in rust. It was unknown how many years ago it was. However, as the flame burned in this brazier, the flame was still as bright as before, like clothes after the flame. Brightly colored silk clothes. The beast deity. He sat on the ground between the flames and the shadows of the darkness, leaning against the stone wall of a platform. The flames flickered, illuminating his face, which still had an indescribably seductive feeling. However, unlike when he had just been resurrected, his face was extremely pale. It was not an exaggeration to say that his face was as pale as a dead man's. Under the fire, leaning close to him, snuggling beside him, was that strange and sinister-looking ferocious beast Tao-Tai. Right now, the Tao-Tai's huge eyes were wide open, slightly grinning, revealing its terrifying fangs. Its mouth seemed to be panting, fiercely through the fire in the brazier, staring at that dark red light far away, which had already become inconspicuous. Although the beast deity's expression was not good, but his expression was very calm. Even a faint smile hung at the corner of his lips, said, You have cultivated for 1,000 years. Isn't it to be human? I said this to you. You should be happy. That female voice turned silent, did not speak for the moment. Instead, that dark red light suddenly brightened. The Tautai seemed to be immediately alerted, made a low roar, staring at that dark red light. That fire slowly moved, heading towards where the beast deity was. The Tautai's face became even more sinister, slowly stood up. Suddenly, a hand stretched out from the side, gently patted the Tautai's head. The Tautai then slowly quietened down. The beast deity retracted his hand, looked back. That fire had already unhurriedly flew to him, like an eye, fixated not far away from him, staring at him. The beast deity looked at that dark red fire for a long time, suddenly smiled and said, "You and I have known each other for no less than 1,000 years. Although we are not friends of life and death, but we are considered old friends. Besides, I'm seriously injured right now. Why are you still so guarded against me?" That dark red flame flickered a few times, suddenly emitted a sharp whistle, and retreated extremely quickly. When it swept past the top of the brazier, it even suppressed the flames in the brazier. The surroundings immediately darkened, and after a while, it returned to normal. At this time, that dark red flame had already disappeared into the darkness. That female indifferent voice sounded at the same time, said, "I don't trust you, just like your Tautai doesn't trust me." The beast deity looked at the darkness ahead, suddenly laughed out loud. Good, well said. Just that I do not understand, since you and I do not trust each other at all. Why are you helping me this time?" That female indifferently said, "Because the thing I want, only you can give it to me now." The beast deity smiled and said, "Just because of these ugly images carved on the stone walls and ground?" He waved his hand. Although the smile was still there, the tiredness on his face seemed to have deepened. The flames in the brazier suddenly surged, making crackling sounds. It was actually several times bigger than before. For a moment, the light shone brightly, and the surrounding temperature quickly became unbearably hot. But whether it was the beast deity or Tautai, or that mysterious figure who was still hidden in the darkness, they did not have the slightest reaction to these. The flames burned, slowly extended in the darkness, as if it was gradually coming to life. Even the shape in the fire also began to slowly shrink and change, from a ball shape to a vague dragon shape. In the darkness, staring at the fire dragon that was gradually taking shape, the woman's voice slowly said, "I remember that it was these ugly images that trapped you for countless years, right?" The beast deity smiled. In the firelight, it was impossible to tell if he was smiling bitterly, ridiculing, or sneering. Because at the moment he smiled, that fire dragon above the brazier had already formed, and the flames brandished its claws, suddenly raised its head to the darkness, making a soundless roar. Almost at the same time, a scorching heat wave surged up like a tidal wave, instantly pounced in all directions, rolling over, destroying everything in front of it. After the sea of fire and the blazing flames around the brazier, for images lit up one by one. The lines were broad, blood red in color. In the drawings were 4 different ferocious and malevolent deity statues. After a while, above the brazier and on the stone walls on the left and right, 4 stone carvings lit up one by one, with roughly the same content. These 8 stone carvings were exactly the same as what Ghostly saw in Funxiang Valley Inferno Altar. 8 Savage Inferno Formation. Chapter 382. A strange aura, accompanied by heat waves, reverberated in this spacious space wave by wave. That fire dragon bared its fangs and brandished its claws, its face ferocious, but it did not continue to expand, as if this was its limit. Even so, under the blazing flames, even the hard ground began to show signs of cracking. On the contrary, the seemingly shabby and crude brazier was safe and sound. The fire blazed, reflected in the beast deity's eyes, as if his eyes were also burning. At the other end of the fire, that woman's voice laughed faintly, said, "Your powers are really exhausted, or are you deliberately lying to me? Although this formation is not activated by the Inferno Mirror, and was damaged when you were resurrected, but its power is definitely not limited to this. The beast deity's handsome face did not change. Calmly said, "Since you were so wary of me, I don't really understand. Why did you insist on coming to save me?" That lady humphed, said, "Haven't I told you before? Firstly, I am here because of this strange formation passed down by the ancient shaman tribe. Another reason is that Fun Xiang Valley's pretentious old man Yun is an eyesore." The beast deity smiled, as if he did not take the woman's words to heart, said, "Although Yun Elon went back on his word, but to be honest, I have never really believed him. If I had won that battle at Xinyan Hill, he would definitely not dare to do this. Adding insult to injury, isn't that what most people do?" That woman said, "Unfortunately, he still does not know. You and I are different. You cannot be killed." The beast deity's eyes were deep, slowly staring at the darkness behind the fire, the blazing fire, but it seemed like it could not shine into that place. "And how do you know I cannot be killed? If I tell you now, I can already be killed, what would you think?" He stared at the darkness, a faint smile on his lips, as if it was provocative and also tempting, slowly said. That woman suddenly did not speak. In the entire cave, there seemed to be only the sound of the burning fire, but for some reason, it seemed even more deathly silent than before. After some time, the beast deity suddenly said, "How many years has it been since we've known each other?" After a long time, the woman said indifferently, "I can't remember. All those years ago, I accidentally came here not long after I attained the Tao. Now that I speak of it, why did you look at me differently at that time?" The beast deity smiled and slowly lowered his head. The weariness on his face seemed to deepen. "Although I was not human at that time, I could not stand loneliness." The woman was silent for a while, as if she was a little surprised. After a while, she said, "Why do you look a little different today? You never used to say things like that." The beast deity's shoulders trembled, and he let out 2 violent coughs. However, he still had a faint smile on his face. It was as if he didn't care about anything. "Have you seen a dying person before? Can he still look normal?" The woman said almost immediately, "But you're not human." "How do you know I'm not human?" The flames in the brazier suddenly rose, like a silent roar of a fire dragon, then slowly fell down. The 8 mysterious, ferocious drawings also slowly fell down. The light dimmed and gradually disappeared into the darkness. The fire dragon gradually melted into the flames and turned into an ordinary fire. The surroundings dimmed, and only the brazier had some light. "What did you do to yourself?" After a long time, the woman asked softly. The beast deity did not answer and did not speak. He looked more and more tired. He slowly raised his hand. In the fire, the skin on his right wrist seemed to have lost its luster. Indistinctly, there was a dark red energy channel hidden in the muscles of his wrist. The beast deity looked at that energy channel for a while and shook his head. He gently made a cut on his wrist. After a while, a cut slowly appeared and a drop of blood flowed out. Fresh blood. Red fresh blood. How can it be? The woman in the darkness was too shocked. She couldn't even continue. After a long time, she seemed to regain her senses. Stunned, she said, You actually became human." The beast deity did not speak. He only smiled. That silent smile. No one knew if it was a bitter smile or a gratified smile. "No wonder. I have always been puzzled. You were born from heaven and earth's evil energy. You should be an immortal being. How could you suffer such a serious injury under the Zhu Xian sword at Xinyan Hill? So it turns out that you have become the person you have always hated at some point in time?" Ha 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 ha. The woman did not know if it was because she felt it was too absurd or because she could not control herself. She laughed out loud. The beast deity's eyes stared at the drop of red blood on his wrist. His eyes flashed with an indescribable, complex emotion, like joy, like sorrow. "I have never hated anyone." He tiredly smiled. "I can come to this world and have my consciousness. Isn't it also human?" The woman was stunned. "What did you say?" The beast deity slowly looked up at the burning flames in the brazier. His voice, in this place where darkness and light alternated, seemed to return to the long years of the past. "The first time I was conscious, she was the one I saw. At that time, I did not even have a body. In a trance, that woman seemed to be watching me. Just that as time passed, I gradually formed and finally knew that she was a human. She was the shaman woman of that generation. Her name was Ling Long. The Taotai beside the beast deity made a low growl. The beast deity stretched out his hand and stroked its head. The Taotai quietened down. That woman did not make sound. She seemed to know that a secret that had been covered in dust for countless years was about to be revealed. In the beast deity's eyes, gentleness slowly occupied the entire place. His eyes also looked into the distant darkness, far away in the cave. Over there, maybe there was a soul that was once there, quietly listening. It was Ling Long who used witchcraft to absorb the heaven and earth evil energy in the southern border and extracted the essence from it to create me. The beast deity faintly said, this secret that had puzzled for thousands of years, no one knew of his origins. Those so-called heroes of the shaman tribe followed Ling Long to put me to death. If they knew that I was created by their respected goddess, I really don't know how they would feel. He smiled faintly. It was as if all the killing and viciousness in the past had never existed on him. At this moment, all he had was just a memory. I had asked Ling Long many times why she created me, but she was never willing to tell me. But later on, I finally understood that she was just doing it for one word. The woman could not help but ask, "What?" The beast deity faintly said, "Longevity." The woman was slightly surprised. "Longevity?" The beast deity nodded and said, "That's right. You also find it ridiculous?" But that day, she did it for this purpose. At that time, Ling Long's attainment in witchcraft had already far surpassed the ancients. In the entire world, she was almost invincible. And in the shaman tribe, everyone revered her like a god. Out of boredom, what she did was to find another target for herself. This sounded similar to the people in the Central Plains. But the mystery of longevity was originally the heavenly Tao. Although she was an exceptionally intelligent woman, she could not decipher it. Finally, one day, she thought of an inhuman way. Inhuman. There is a limit to a person's lifespan. Even if one is successful in cultivation, he can only live for a few hundred more years. But inhuman beings usually have longer lifespans. And since the creation of heaven and earth, the evil energy of yin and yang, they are eternal. Since she thought of this, she studied it carefully. Finally, she created me from the lifeless world. She is really amazing, the woman said faintly. The beast deity smiled faintly and said, "Yes, she is really an amazing woman. Ever since I came to this world, the first person I saw when I woke up was her. I don't know how many years have passed, but she was the only one in my world. Slowly, I started to take shape. Because my original body was born from the evil energy of heaven and earth. Since I had a divine sense, I naturally started to absorb the evil energy around me and gradually became stronger. But she seemed to be a little uneasy. The way she looked at me was no longer so friendly. When my power finally started to be able to compete with hers from that day onwards, she never smiled at me again. I was very confused then. I do not know why. Actually, I also did not know why my power grew so quickly. But to me, what was the point of power? I just wanted to be with her, to be with her. You can tell her, won't she know? The woman could not help but say. I said it many times. Now that I think about it, it's probably like a child acting like a spoiled child to his mother. The beast deity smiled faintly, but it disappeared again. But she never believed me. The woman was silent for a long time. The beast deity was also silent, as if immersed in his memories. The flame was still burning in the brazier. It trembled slightly in mid-air, as if it was panting. Time seemed to have stopped in her tracks in this dark place. She tilted her head and listened. Chapter 383. The years of the past were like frozen memories. They melted bit by bit before slowly disappearing. Who could reverse it? Was it you or me? Or were we all just people who were panting and running in time, unable to catch up with time, gradually growing old and disappearing into the shadows? Finally, there came a day when I didn't want to stay in that room with only her. I wanted to go out and take a look. That day, she left for a long time and didn't return. I broke the restriction she placed on me, opened the door to her room, and walked out. There were many, many, many people, but when they saw me, they all screamed in fear and ran for their lives. I don't know why, but at first I was very panicked, then angry, and finally I felt a wave of hostility rush up from my heart. It was also at this moment that a dozen warriors who heard the news started to attack me. I parried and retreated at the same time. I didn't want to fight them. I regret it. I just want to be with my Ling Long. I just wanted to come out and take a look. I spoke with all my might. I explained with all my might, but no one listened until I killed the first person by mistake. There was a long silence. That young soldier hung down in my hands. His head slowly drooped down. Fresh blood flowed out of his body. I was stunned, and so were the others. Then, they rushed over even more ferociously. Amidst their curses, I could clearly hear cries in the distance. It was that warrior's family crying. I don't know, but from the first time I saw the blood, my body had already changed. That desire to kill was like a madman coiling around me. I didn't want to kill, but I couldn't control it. So I took action. I killed. I killed many people. Many, many people. The beast god lowered his head, but his voice continued. I stood in the pool of blood. I don't know how long I stood there, but I slowly woke up. Then I saw in the distance, surrounded by countless people, Ling Long had returned. She stared at me without blinking her eyes. Her face was pale beyond belief. I don't know why, but I was very afraid. I felt that I was really in the wrong, but I really didn't know what I did wrong. Then, Ling Long made her move. She personally attacked me. I would not strike back. I wished to explain to her. I wished to tell her that I would never dare to come out again, and that I would be content to stay in that room and be with her alone from then on. I've said these words countless times, but she didn't listen even once. Her magic wasn't something that those ordinary warriors could compare with. Soon, my body was riddled with holes, but every time these wounds were injured, they would absorb the evil energy in the surroundings to recover. Even I could feel that every time Ling Long hit me, my power would grow a little bit faster. In the end, Ling Long also realized this. Her face turned ashen, as if she had given up all hope. The beast deity was still smiling as he reminisced, but there was a hint of pain on his face. I slowly began to feel that Ling Long really hated me. She used all kinds of sorcery on me like a madman. Although my body was indestructible, my heart was really in pain. So, in the end, I ran away on my own. And on the way, everyone I met was scared out of their wits. It was only later that I realized that I looked really scary in the eyes of those ordinary people. He gently patted the evil beast Tao Tai lying beside him and said, I looked even uglier than it at that time. After leaving Ling Long, I escaped into the 100,000 Great Mountains. Not long after, I found this cave and temporarily stayed here. But I wanted to go back. I wholeheartedly wanted to be with Ling Long. So, I finally went back, but what welcomed me was this formation. The flames in the brazier made crackling sounds, as if responding to the beast god's words. I never thought that there would be such a terrifying power in this world. Ling Long used the power of the Inferno Mirror to set up the 8th Savage Inferno formation and summon the 8th Wilderness Fire Dragon. Under the blazing flames that could burn everything in the world, even though I had an immortal body, I was still badly injured and my body was destroyed. I desperately told Ling Long that I didn't want to do anything else. I just wanted to be with her. But she didn't seem to listen to me at all. She wanted to burn me to death. In the end, I ran away and escaped back to this cave. I don't know why Ling Long treated me like this, but I couldn't accept it. I really wanted to be with her. After returning here, with the help of the 100,000 Great Mountains' unique heaven and earth vicious energy, I recovered very quickly. Just when I planned to secretly look for her again, she actually chased after me. She brought 7 so-called warriors and chased me to this ancient cave. She personally came in and found me. I wasn't surprised, because I was created by her. If there was anyone in the world who could deal with me and understand me, who else could it be other than her? But I really didn't understand. Why did she treat me like this? I said so many things to her. Why did she not listen at all? But this time, Ling Long actually answered me. She said that it was all her fault. Creating a monster like me was a grave mistake on her part, because I was born of the heaven and earth vicious energy. I was born with a desire to kill. If I was allowed to live in this world, I'm afraid the common people would suffer. I desperately explained to her that I wouldn't. I only wanted to be with her. I didn't want anything else. But she only smiled bitterly and said that she believed in me. In fact, she was willing to be with me. But what if she died? In the ancient cave, far away, there seemed to be someone sighing in the darkness. Because of that scene thousands of years ago, the tears that fell, did anyone still remember? I was dumbfounded and my mind went blank. I knew that I was immortal, but I never thought that Linglong would die. I could still remember it clearly. Linglong's pale smile had tears rolling down her cheeks. Then, she activated the 8 Fiends' mysterious flame formation again. She trapped me inside and burned my body again. But she couldn't destroy the vicious energy essence that I had turned into. After the formation, her vitality was greatly damaged. But I was created by her. In the flames, I still asked her, "Why did you do this to me?" This time, she didn't say anything. She placed the formation in this ancient cave to restrict me. She burned it day and night. As long as my vicious energy recovered, the flames would burn it away. In the end, she looked at me in a daze. She suddenly asked me, "What other wishes do I have?" The beast deity chuckled. "Wish? What wish can I have? All I wanted was to be with her." So I asked her, "Why can't I be with her?" Linglong lowered her head. She slowly said, "Because I am not human. I am not even a living creature. It is fated that we cannot be together." In the raging flames, I faced her and said, "Then let me be a human." His voice suddenly rose. He raised his head and shouted towards the ceiling of the cave. "Let me be a human." Rumble. The walls shook. Rocks fell. The sound was like a drum. It was deafening. In the flying dust, the beast god slowly lowered his head. "What happened after that?" the woman in the darkness asked. She seemed to be stunned. After a long time, she didn't move. I endured the pain of being burned by the flames. All my hopes turned to dust. But she suddenly stood up. She stopped the formation and walked to my side. I looked at her blankly. I didn't know what she wanted to do. She said to me in a low voice that she had let me down. Then at this point, the beast god's voice suddenly started to tremble. She started to chant a long and tedious spell, slowly pulled out the knife, and then started to cut herself, one slash at a time. "What?" the woman in the darkness exclaimed. I was also stunned. No, I was scared silly. I was really stunned. I didn't know what she was doing. Slowly, Linglong used her own flesh and blood. She even used her own bones to build a skeleton on the ground. Then, she placed me on the skeleton. As her incantation became more and more urgent, I gradually melted into the body. Even my consciousness started to fade. I heard her voice getting softer and softer, but she was still telling me that this was the last thing she could do for me. In the future, as long as someone found the 5 divine instruments and placed them on the skeleton, I would be able to come back to life. But after I came back to life, although my demonic powers would still be there, my body would be that of a human. Since I was a human, I would no longer be immortal. She said that she was wholeheartedly pursuing immortality and offended the heavenly Tao. She created a monster like me and had an indecent relationship with me, which made her even more wrong. Also, because of me, she killed countless lives and brought calamity upon the world. She killed me with her own hands, but she didn't say anything else. My consciousness was slowly fading away. In my daze, I heard her last words, "I'll always be with you." I have never understood this sentence, until I, after thousands of years, came back to life. I stood at the entrance of the ancient cave. That statue, which was battered by wind, frost, rain, and snow, tempered by the sun and the moon, still gazed deeply into the depths of the ancient cave. I hugged her. I understood. Chapter 384. Light footsteps could be heard in the dark cave. A faint green light flickered in front of them. After the light, Ghostly and Jean Pinger appeared. The two of them had already entered very deep into the subdued devil ancient cave, but this strange cave seemed to have no end. The dark and damp path twisted and turned, as if endlessly extending forward. The light from a soul-devouring stick could only illuminate at most 6 chi in front of them, and the surrounding further was that silent, deep darkness. Among them, there seemed to be mysterious eyes staring at the two intruders. Jean Pinger walked not far behind Ghostly. For some reason, she slowly felt herself starting to feel nervous. At the end of this path, nobody knew where it was and what would be there, waiting for them. Even if she saw a ferocious evil beast, most likely it would not waver her determination. However, this void of darkness instead made her agitated. Ghostly's footsteps suddenly stopped. Jean Pinger's heart jumped, almost bumped into his back, quickly stopped her body, at the same time on full alert, secretly looked around, lowered her voice, and said, "Why? Did you discover something?" Ghostly turned his head and looked at her. Under the faint green light, Jean Pinger's skin looked bewitchingly beautiful. He was silent for a moment, said, "Your breathing sounds a little messed up." Jean Pinger was stunned for a moment, frowned, and then slowly straightened her body, snorted coldly. Ghostly looked at her and did not say anything. He turned around and continued to walk forward. After a few steps, he heard the girl behind him take a deep breath. A moment later, she caught up with him again. Her body and breathing had already calmed down. Looking from behind, that man's back was reflected in Jean Pinger's eyes, solid, steady. For some reason, Jean Pinger found herself at ease. Just that on his shoulder, that monkey at the moment shrunk its head, looked listless. Only that long tail drooped down, swaying back and forth with Ghostly's steps. The green light emitted from the soul-devouring stick in Ghostly's hand, in the darkness, seemed especially gentle. The sinister orb's murderous evil power, right now, seemed to have disappeared. The light swept across the stone walls, illuminating everything before it slowly returned to darkness. Jean Pinger looked around silently. After entering the subduing devil ancient cave, the unique wind here was bone-chilling, almost able to freeze one's blood into ice cubes. But as they went deeper and deeper into the ancient cave, not only did the wind not become stronger, but it also gradually weakened. At this moment, they could no longer feel the existence of the wind. Without the sound of the wind, their surroundings were dead silent. Looking at the places that were illuminated by the light, Jean Pinger's brows furrowed even tighter. When she first entered the ancient cave, Jean Pinger did not notice the surrounding stone walls. But after going deeper, Jean Pinger instead discovered that in the depths of the legendary subdued devil ancient cave, there were more and more traces of man-made construction. On the surrounding stone walls, although it had been a long time, but the flatness was not something that could be formed naturally. Even the path under their feet, although it was full of twists and turns, there were few ups and downs. Moving forward, it was not as difficult as they had expected. And in this cave, there was not the slightest bit of the stench of an evil demon, and there were no terrifying human or beast skeletons on the ground. This subduing devil ancient cave seemed to be a clean and quiet place, not like the residence of the world's #1 demon. Just like that, they turned another corner. That darkness suddenly thickened, like an invisible wall, in an instant lay in front of them. The light emitted by the soul-devouring stick, at the moment the two of them turned around, was reflected back by the invisible wall. Almost at the same time, Ghostly and Jean Pinger's bodies paused, and then swiftly floated backwards. Rumble! With a muffled sound, 2 large holes were blasted open where they were standing. Broken stones flew everywhere, hitting the surrounding stone walls and making loud banging sounds. That darkness seemed to roar, like an avalanche, charged past the corner, pouncing towards them. Ghostly and Jean Pinger, until now, still could not tell what kind of monster it was. Jean Pinger's face turned slightly pale, her body moved slightly. She had already flashed 10 John behind. In that strong wind, suddenly green light flourished. Ghostly's entire body was shrouded by the green halo, standing below that seemingly endless darkness, coldly staring at that black wall. Even the monkey Xiao Hui on his shoulder, 3 eyes also lit up at the same time, flashing a faint golden color. That black veil came crashing down, The sound of the wind was strong. Even the stones on the ground were once again shot up, but in this darkness, Ghost Lee's figure stood still. The green light did not dim, and instead grew stronger. A strong light exploded from his right hand. In an instant, his palm had already stretched out, piercing into the darkness. The strong green light that was circling around Ghost Lee's right hand, the moment he pierced into the darkness, suddenly disappeared, as if it was blocked by something, but the next moment a loud sound was heard. That black veil emitted sounds. The next moment, 7 holes were forcefully torn open. From within, dazzling green light shone out. Roar! A painful roar suddenly erupted from the front. The mountain-like black curtain suddenly dispersed, and it was still pitch black. However, in the depths of the darkness, 2 large red eyes appeared. The soul-devouring stick in Ghost Lee's hand gave out an increasingly strong light. With the help of this light, Ghost Lee and Jean Pinger, who was standing behind, could see clearly. The one guarding this place was actually an enormous black bat. Its entire body was black. Only its 2 eyes were blood red. Most likely the huge body and bat wings had blocked its eyes. That was why they were unable to see the true body of this evil creature. But most likely this kind of evil creature's usual attack was like this, suddenly attacking in the darkness. It was indeed easy to panic, not knowing how to deal with it. Right now, on that black bat's bat wings, Ghost Lee had 7 wounds. Strange light blue blood spilled on its body. Obviously, it was not light. But this kind of evil creature was never timid. Instead, it seemed to be enraged, opened its huge mouth and bellowed. The bat wings spread out, although it was not stable, but the darkness flourished again, swept over. A cold glint flashed in Ghost Lee's eyes. The sinister orb at the tip of the stick shone with evil light at the same time. The bat was about to pounce. Suddenly, a whistling sound was heard from Ghost Lee's shoulder. A gray figure flashed past. It was Xiao Hui, who had jumped out from his shoulder, charging towards that evil creature, which was several times bigger than the monkey. Ghost Lee frowned. Even Jean Pinger, who was standing behind, was also stunned. Looking over, the difference between the 2 animals in the air was really too big. Unexpectedly, just as Jean Pinger was thinking about this, and was even slightly worried for that monkey, in the green light, Xiao Hui's figure was continuously growing bigger. In just a short time, it had already turned from a less than 3-chi gray little monkey into a 3-eyed monkey that almost filled the entire cave, howling furiously, 3 blood-red eyes, 3-eyed monkey. The 2 enormous beasts in the air collided with a loud bang. The surrounding stone walls seemed unable to withstand such a huge impact, started to shake violently. Jean Pinger even felt that the ground under her feet started to shake. Instead, Ghost Lee, who was standing not far away from the 2 beasts, his face slowly regained his composure, a faint smile on his lips, completely disregarding the falling stones like rain, the murderous aura in his eyes. The huge black bat was clearly startled by the sudden appearance of the huge ape, but it still ferociously pounced over. Just as the gray, huge figure swept past, Xiao Hui with extreme agility flashed in between the bat's claws. Both of its huge palms grabbed forward, grabbed the base of the bat's wings near its body. The demon bat let out a shrill scream, as if it felt fear for the first time. However, the 3 red eyes in front of it were even scarier than it. Sharp fangs flashed in the darkness, and then it raised its head to the sky and let out a long cry. That howl was like a tidal wave, rumbled in this cave with unstoppable force, as if it was facing this world's living beings, unyielding provocation. Under the flickering of the black and green lights, savagery and anger alternated. The huge ape howled. Its huge arms waved, like a demon laughing and dancing. Chapter 385. See, blue blood splashed everywhere. The huge black demon bat was torn into 2 halves by the 3-eyed spirit monkey and thrown far away. Far away, that long cry reverberated, layers upon layers, unceasingly. The might of one rage, to such an extent. The huge ape slowly turned around, looked down. That man was still standing at the same spot, looking at it. The red light in its eyes slowly disappeared. Suddenly, it stretched out its hand and scratched its head, grinned. Its body swiftly shrunk, very quickly returned to its original size, turned into Xiao Hui. It crouched on the ground, turned its head, looked at its master. Its right hand occasionally stroked its head, the long tail behind it gently swaying. Ghostly looked at Xiao Hui. A warm smile slowly appeared in his eyes. Only facing this monkey, he could smile wholeheartedly. He smiled and stretched out his hand. Xiao Hui called out a few times. Both its legs bounced, and in a few steps, scurried up to Ghost Li's shoulder, crouched down, grinned incessantly, looking very happy. Ghostly thought for a while and stretched out his hand to pick up Xiao Hui, hugged it with both hands, and brought it in front of him. Carefully looked it up and down. The gray monkey's 3 eyes blinked together, not knowing what Ghostly wanted to do. Jean Pinger also slowly walked up, stood beside, looked at Ghostly, her face deep in thought, not knowing what she was thinking. Ghostly looked at Xiao Hui for a moment, nodded his head, placed it back on his shoulder, and then stroked its head, suddenly smiled and said, "After we go out, I will buy wine for you to drink." Jean Pinger was lost in thought. The words suddenly entered her ears. For a moment she did not react. Her mouth opened in shock. Her mind was blank for a moment. On the contrary, the monkey was stunned for a moment and then became overjoyed. It laughed incessantly, bared its fangs, and brandished its claws on Ghost Li's shoulder. After a moment, it seemed to suddenly come to its senses, took off the big empty wine bag that it had been carrying on its back for a long time. Without even looking, threw it hard on the ground. Making a sound, dust flew up high. Ghostly smiled and walked forward, gradually merging into the darkness. But under the green light, his figure was so distinct in the darkness, and that gray-furred monkey's joyful figure was also so harmonious with him, as if they were one, inseparable. Jean Pinger slowly took a few steps forward. Looking at the figure of the man and the monkey, she couldn't help but feel a chill. Just that unknowingly, the surroundings lost the illumination of Ghost Li's soul-devouring green light and gradually darkened. Jean Pinger reacted, stretched out her right hand. The purple light lit up and once again illuminated the surroundings. She composed herself and was about to quicken her steps to catch up with Ghost Li when suddenly a black figure moved in the darkness ahead, scurrying towards her. Jean Pinger was startled and quickly prepared herself, but unexpectedly that figure came near and under the purple light. It was actually the monkey Xiao Hui. Jean Pinger frowned, but in her heart she heaved a sigh of relief, just as she did not know why this extremely strange yet extremely powerful monkey, like its master, suddenly ran back. Xiao Hui jumped in front of Jean Pinger and looked around. Suddenly, an angry expression appeared on its face and loudly growled at Jean Pinger. Jean Pinger was surprised, spread out her hands, and asked in surprise, "What are you doing?" Xiao Hui's 3 eyes stared at Jean Pinger at the same time. Jean Pinger was an exceptional beauty, but obviously this beauty had no effect on the monkey. Xiao Hui, with an annoyed look, angrily pointed at its feet. Jean Pinger looked down, with an ah sound, stepped back, and coincidentally stepped on the big wine bag that Xiao Hui had thrown away. Xiao Hui was indignant and picked up the wine bag again. Using its hand to pat off the dust, it actually hung the wine bag on its body again. Jean Pinger was both angry and amused, angrily said, "Hey, damn monkey, that was thrown away by you yourself. Why are you so fierce to me?" Xiao Hui made 2 strange sounds at Jean Pinger, grimaced, and then with a so, it scurried back and in a blink disappeared into the darkness ahead, obviously chasing after Ghostly. Jean Pinger was stunned for a moment, eventually shook her head with a bitter smile and followed. Deep inside the subdued, devil ancient cave, the fire in the brazier was still burning in loneliness. The dusty past seemed to reverberate softly in this quiet cave. The beast deity and that mysterious girl in the darkness did not speak. They were both silent, as if still immersed in that unbearable past. Even the Tao Tai beside was lying on the ground tiredly, seemed to have fallen asleep. But in this silence, suddenly, the Tao Tai seemed to be startled by something. Abruptly lifted its head from between its claws, its huge bell-like eyes stared at the distant exit, an ear-piercing roar coming from its mouth, carrying a trace of uneasiness. The beast deity slowly opened his eyes, frowned slightly, and in the darkness, that girl seemed to have also made a sound. That indistinct long roar, although it had already become weak, but it was still like a wild, wild beast charging over from afar and scrupulously breaking the silence, arrived with a loud rumble. "Someone is coming," the beast deity indifferently said. That girl in the darkness was silent for a moment, suddenly sneered and said, "Someone actually managed to find their way here. Most likely it is that old man Yun Elon who sent people over to die, and at the same time to test your strength." The beast deity still looked as tired as ever, as if he didn't care about anything at all. He said, "Whatever, I can't be bothered to care about it. But how did these people manage to go so deep into the cave? From the sounds, it seems like they've already gone past where Black Bat is. But to be able to enter this cave, most likely they can deal with the Black Bat, just that there is still a black tiger spirit at the cave entrance. They actually managed to enter without a sound. The black tiger also did not make any movements. It is not simple." The female voice in the darkness suddenly said, "Since you're no longer an undying and indestructible body, with your current injuries, can you deal with these enemies of unknown strength?" The beast deity smiled and said, "I don't know, but I am not worried." That girl said, "Why?" The beast god smiled. "With you around, what do I have to fear?" The woman's voice was silent for a moment before she sneered. "What does your death have to do with me? Don't think that I'll help you again just because I helped you once. With your level of cultivation, although I have some friendship with you, it's hard to say when you will turn against me in the future. It's better for you to die earlier." The beast deity coughed twice, his face still showing some pain, but the smile on his lips did not diminish. He only looked into the darkness and said, "I will die sooner or later, don't worry. But before that, don't you want to comprehend the 8 savage inferno formation passed down by the sorcerer tribe? If I die, won't you lose everything?" The woman snorted and said, "The formation is right here. Why would I be afraid of you?" The beast deity smiled and said, "The 8 savage inferno spell formation diagram that has been passed down in the world until now is only here in Funxiang Valley Inferno Altar. Funxiang Valley's diagram has already been destroyed. Only this place is left. You have yet to comprehend the mysteries of the formation. Only I can activate the formation for you to comprehend. If you have the Inferno Mirror in your hands, you will naturally be able to activate the formation. A pity you don't have it." Speaking till here, he paused. A faint melancholy flashed across his face and said, "Now you also know, this formation was set up by Ling Long to restrain me. If I die, this formation will also be destroyed. In that case, you won't get anything?" The woman was silent. After a long while, she said, "You are ruthless. I will deal with these people." The beast deity slowly shook his head and said, "It's not that I am ruthless. It's because you have concerns. That's why you are controlled by others. But," he slowly lifted his eyes and looked into the darkness, said, "Can you tell me, for whom exactly must you take the risk to be with me, to comprehend this formation?" There was no answer. The surroundings were silent, as if in that moment, the mysterious woman in the darkness had already gone far away. The fire in the brazier was still burning, reflected in the beast deity's eyes. The Taotai slowly stood up, continuously making low growls, looking very uneasy. The beast deity silently looked into the darkness ahead, in silence. Chapter 386. Central Plains, 20 miles outside of Heyong City. The sky gradually darkened. The pedestrians on the ancient path also gradually disappeared. It was a time of chaos. Demons were rampant, although they were at the foot of the good faction's Qing Yun sect mountain. But no one could say for sure if they would suddenly meet any demons or ghosts. Everyone only had one life. Even the common people cherished their own lives. Not to mention that the demon-beast catastrophe had just passed. The people who had survived naturally cherished themselves even more. Just that there were still a few figures walking conspicuously on the road. An old man at the front, with a celestial demeanor, holding a bamboo pole on hung an old cloth, written on it, "Immortal Guide," 4 words. Behind him followed a man and a woman. The man with a headscarf covering his face, the woman delicate and cute, although the sky was dark, but she still seemed to be concentrating on a black, wordless book in her hands. This was naturally Tannis Ka, Xiao Huan, and Wild Dog Taoist. Along the way, they dragged their feet. Zhou Yixian would occasionally find a passerby to pull aside, beaming with joy and talk nonsense. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist naturally could not stand it. Just that those who were pulled for fortune-telling were really like what Zhou Yixian said before, after being told by him. All of them were greatly energized after paying. They seemed to be reignited and happily left. In the end, Zhou Yixian earned his fill of money. Xiao Huan was too lazy to care about him. She only cared about reading. In this period of time, Xiao Huan became more and more fascinated by the book that Mr. Ghost left behind. Not only would she read it when she was resting, even when she was walking, she would not let go of the book. Right now the sky was already dark, but she did not seem to notice it, still fully immersed in the book. Wild Dog Taoist called out to Tannis Ka, said, "Senior, it seems like we will not be able to reach Heyang City today. If we cannot find the family, I'm afraid we will have to spend the night in the wilderness." Tannis Ka looked at the sky, nodded his head, then looked around, but only saw darkness, not to mention that there were no people living in this wilderness. Not even a dilapidated temple or a dilapidated house could be seen. Tannis Ka coughed, saw Wild Dog Taoist was looking at him. His granddaughter Tani did not have any reaction, still following behind Wild Dog Taoist, focused on reading that black ghost book. Tannis Ka had always felt that it was inappropriate for his granddaughter to read this book of Ghost Tao, but he could not tell what was wrong. Every time he talked about how cruel and evil Ghost Tao was, Xiao Huan would use one sentence to dismiss him. This demonic technique has a lot of ways to save people. It's much stronger than your physiognomy. Every time Tannis Ka heard this, he would be speechless, but he was thick-skinned enough and refused to admit defeat. But he could not continue to ask Xiao Huan to throw away the Ghost Tao. No matter what, Great Immortal Zhou found Xiao Huan's book to be an eyesore. He shouted angrily, "Xiao Huan, why are you still reading that damn book at a time like this?" Xiao Huan then raised her head from a book, looked at Tannis Ka, impatiently said, "Grandpa, we are walking so slowly. Not because I'm reading the book, it's because you're scamming people by fortune-telling. That's why we are walking so slowly." Tannis Ka choked, blushed, coughed twice, turned his head, laughed dryly, and said, Forget it. Let's not talk about this. I mean, we have no place to stay now. We have to think of a way." Wild Dog Taoist shook his head, said, "We really can't find a place to stay. Senior, you're more familiar with this place than us. Think if there are any dilapidated temples nearby, so we can spend the night." Tannis Ka snorted, sneered, and said, "How do you know I am more familiar with this place? Although I was born in Heyang City, but I've always been wandering the world. When would I be familiar with this place? Suddenly, he seemed to be deep in thought and stopped halfway through his sentence. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist were puzzled. Xiao Huan said, "Grandpa, what are you trying to say?" Tannis Ka frowned, seemed to recall something but could not be sure. He slowly turned and looked ahead, seemed to be trying hard to recall something. "That seems like I really remember. Not far ahead there is a fork road. Enter from that small path, although it is a little far, but there is indeed a house there." Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist became happy. Xiao Huan smiled and said, "Really? Then what are we waiting for? Let's go." Tannis Ka, for some reason, seemed hesitant. His brows kept frowning, trying hard to recall something, said, "But I keep feeling something is not right. It has been too long. I can only vaguely remember there is a house in this direction outside Heyang City, but that house does not seem to be a good place. But what exactly it is, I can't remember." Xiao Huan rolled her eyes at him, walked ahead and ignored him. She said, "All right, let's go quickly. At least we have a house. It doesn't matter how broken it is. At least it's better than sleeping outdoors." Xiao Huan left first. Wild Dog Taoist naturally followed. Tannis Ka walked at the back, involuntarily followed, but kept patting his head, frowning tightly, his mouth mumbling, said, "What exactly is the house? Why can't I remember?" After walking for a distance, the sky had completely darkened, but with the help of the few weak stars, the three of them indeed found an almost hidden small path leading deep into the wilderness. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist nodded. walked towards that small path. Wild Dog Taoist even hastened his steps, walking ahead of Xiao Huan, at the same time vigilantly looking around. Only Tanis Ka was still following at the back, his mouth occasionally muttering with some grumbling. Seemed like he still could not remember the origin of that house in his memory and what it was used for. This small path was actually very long. The three of them walked for almost an hour and still did not see any signs of a house. Xiao Huan started to suspect, turned and said to Tanis Ka, "Grandpa, you really did not remember wrongly?" Tanis Ka was glanced at by Xiao Huan, unconsciously felt guilty, laughed dryly, and said, This. You know, people are getting older. Sometimes it is hard to avoid remembering things wrongly. But I really remember that there's a house on this road, just that what the house was used for, I can't remember for the moment. Besides, after so many years, it is not impossible that the house was demolished. Even if no one demolished it, the wind, frost, rain, and snow most likely collapsed. Xiao Huan for a moment could not speak, shook her head, turned around. Suddenly Wild Dog Taoist stopped, turned back and shouted, "You all quickly come, the house is here." Xiao Huan and Tanis Ka were surprised. Tanis Ka was overjoyed, laughed loudly, and said, "Aha! Old man," I said, "with this immortal's intelligence, how can I not remember there is a house here? How can I remember wrongly?" Xiao Huan ignored him, quickly walked to Wild Dog Taoist, looked ahead, saw at the end of the small path there was a house. The area was not small, but looking from afar, the courtyard was barren, the walls damaged, there was no sign of human presence. Obviously, it had been abandoned for many years. Tanis Ka slowly walked over, shaking his head. His mouth made clicking sounds, seemed to be praising himself. Xiao Huan rolled her eyes at him, said, "Let's go quickly, Grandpa." After speaking, the three of them walked towards the house. The night breeze blew over, the wilderness was slightly cold. The three of them shrunk their necks. Walking nearer, they could see more clearly. This was really a dilapidated house, where the walls used to be were collapsed, broken. Even the courtyard door was left with an extremely dilapidated door frame. Even the door planks were gone. As for the courtyard, there was only one house. The roof seemed to be missing by half. Even the beams were exposed. The house seemed to have a door. It was unlatched. The entire house looked like it was built with wooden planks. After the wind and rain eroded, a moldy smell wafted over. Xiao Huan frowned, but Zhou Yixian was rather happy. Slowly walked into the yard, looked around, although it was overgrown with weeds, but there was nothing strange. Seemed like although he still could not remember what kind of house this was, but at least it should not be dangerous. Chapter 387. He turned and called Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist in. Xiao Huan walked to Zhou Yixian, hesitated for a moment, suddenly turned and said to Wild Dog Taoist, "Priest, do you feel the layout of this house? We seem to have seen it somewhere before." Wild Dog Taoist was surprised, looked around, did not understand for a long time, shook his head, indicated he did not know. Tanis Ka impatiently said, "What do you remember? This house is so old. Even your grandfather I cannot remember. Don't tell me you have seen it before." Xiao Huan shrugged her shoulders, said, "That's true, never mind. Let's go in and take a look." Tanis Ka laughed, waved his hand, and said, "Let's go." Then he led the two of them to the stone steps in front of the house. Jia pushed the door open. Just when Tanis Ka was standing at the door, peeking into the dark house, Xiao Huan suddenly felt her feet moved, touched something. She looked down. It was a shabby black car. There seemed to be some words on it. Out of curiosity, she squatted down and pulled out the black wooden tablet from the ruins. She brushed away the debris and carefully looked at it. After a moment, her body suddenly trembled and she took a few steps back. Even her face was a bit pale. She was a bit angry and loudly said, "Grandpa, look at this place." Tanis Ka turned his head in shock. Obviously, although he looked for a long time, but the house was too dark, he could not see clearly, said, "What, Xiao Huan?" Xiao Huan pointed at his feet, angrily said, "Look for yourself." Tanis Ka looked down, looked carefully at the wooden card. Suddenly he was stunned, shook his head, used his hand to wipe his eyes, looked again, suddenly with a loud cry, jumped down from the stone steps. His hands were vigorous, did not look like an old person at all. On the black card, although the words were blurred but could still be recognized as more two words. Xiao Huan was angry and afraid. angrily said to Tannis-Ka. You, what kind of place are you leading us to? Actually brought us to this damn place again. Last time in Hyong City, you have done this kind of thing. Tannis-Ka's old face turned red and white, extremely embarrassed, said, This old man also said, I really only remember there's a house here, but I really can't remember what it is used for, so it is. Xiao Huan spat, interrupted him, said, You talk too much. Why are you talking so much? Let's go. Tannis-Ka hurriedly said, Yes, let's go every time we encounter. This kind of place, we will be unlucky. He was hurriedly turning around. When he was speaking, he suddenly stopped. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist, who were following behind him, almost knocked into him. Xiao Huan popped her head out from behind, angrily said, Grandfather, what are you doing again? Her voice suddenly paused. Right now, the moonless night, under the sparse starlight, in front of the haunted house in the wilderness, Tannis-Ka and the other two stood stunned. In front of them, at the entrance of the courtyard that they had just entered from, stood a figure. That person was rather tall. The material of his clothes also seemed to be pretty good, just that his entire body was extremely dirty. Even his clothes were torn in a few places. They could barely see that it was originally dark green color. Looking at the style, it seemed to be a Taoist robe worn by a monk. For some reason, that person's face seemed to be in the shadows. Tannis-Ka and the rest could not see his face clearly, but that person had silently appeared behind them, like a ghost. A gush of cold air rose from their backs. After a long time, that person, like a stone, stood there motionless, made Tannis-Ka and the rest even more frightened. From this person, they could not feel a trace of a living person's breath. You, who exactly are you? Her voice trembled slightly, but finally it was Xiao Huan who slowly opened her mouth and asked. That person did not react, not to mention answer, but after a moment, the shadow that shrouded his face, suddenly like ghost fire, lit up two faint dark red lights, as if a pair of strange eyes were staring deeply at the person before them. Suddenly, Tannis-Ka made a light cry. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist were shocked, turned and saw that Tannis-Ka was not looking at that person's face. Instead, his eyes were looking at that person's arm, said, That is Qing Yun's sex symbol. 10,000 great mountains, subdue, devil, ancient cave. The darkness seemed to be endless, blocking in front of Ghost Li and Jean Pinger. They walked for a long time, but this road seemed to be endless. But the strange thing was, in this ancient cave, there seemed to be only one path. There were no other forks, and the worry of getting lost was avoided. Ever since passing the Black Bat in the subdue, devil, ancient cave, at intervals of distance, there would be one or a few tyrannical demons guarding. Some of them even made Jean Pinger surprised. But Ghost Li at this moment displayed a power that he had never shown before, like a hot knife through butter, directly killed his way in. Almost no demon could withstand his attacks. Even that three-eyed monkey Xiao Hui. Its valiance was also shocking. That Black Bat's fate also happened to a few other tyrannical demons. Jean Pinger did not make a move along the way. But along the way, her expression turned uglier and uglier. Ghost Li's skills were high. The speed of his improvement, far beyond her imagination. Until the end, she secretly thought, in the evil sect, could there be anyone who could compare to this person? That Ghost King with great talent and bold vision? Or that unfathomable Mr. Ghost? Right now, Ghost Li, just in front of Jean Pinger, sent a ferocious two-headed demon leopard flying. That huge beast body heavily crashed onto the hard stone wall, looking like it was doomed. Ghost Li did not look at that leopard. His expression did not change. Continued to walk forward. Xiao Hui on his shoulder instead seemed to be in high spirits, looking around. Jean Pinger followed behind them, passed by that two-headed demon leopard, turned her head and saw that on the leopard's body, the thick body was actually shriveled, as if the essence in its body was sucked away. This was naturally caused by the sinister orb evil power. Just that this kind of demonic beast itself was an extremely tyrannical creature. Even though Ghost Li had the soul-devouring stick in his hand, but in an instant he was able to kill such a huge demonic beast. This level of cultivation, it was not just powerful, it was terrifying. This man, since when his skills had advanced by leaps and bounds. Jean Pinger was more and more alarmed, watching Ghost Li's back. Her gaze became more and more complicated, and at this moment, suddenly, Ghostly stopped. A wary expression slowly surfaced on his face. Jean Pinger was startled. Along the way, although there were many demon beasts guarding, but she had never seen Ghostly with such a cautious expression. She quickly concentrated, and as expected realized something was wrong with the surroundings. After the death of the two-headed demon leopard, the surroundings resumed its usual silence, but right now, in that shapeless darkness, a deep and serene singing voice was heard. Small Pine Hill, the moon like frost, people like floating cotton flowers, also heard. 10 over years, 3,000 years, I hope we do not forget each other. That voice was mournful, although it did not sound loud, but for some reason it entered the ears. Every word was heard clearly. Listening to the voice at first, it seemed extremely desolate, and then the state of mind became sorrowful, as if in the unseen world, following the singer through 3,000 years, reliving that unknown yet poignant gentleness. Time is heartless like a knife. What warms your heart? Is it only a pair of faint smiling eyes? Have you forgotten? Many years later, or another cycle of vicissitudes. What you remember, what is it? That blank emptiness was like a memory, staring blankly at the darkness, far away. Once have I ever hugged before? And you? The monkey Xiao Hui suddenly called out, as if it was extremely happy. It actually jumped down from Ghostly's shoulder and scurried into the darkness. Chapter 388. Xiao Hui's figure in a blink disappeared into the darkness. Ghostly also did not expect that Xiao Hui would suddenly make such a strange move. Was surprised, but he did not stand up to pursue. Instead, slowly lifted his head, listening to the faint singing in the darkness. The singing sounded somewhat familiar, as if he had heard it somewhere before. How many years, just like this singing, hurriedly passed by. Jean Pinger walked to Ghostly, carefully looked around, quietly said, "What is it?" Ghostly did not answer. His face instead revealed a complicated expression. Xiao Hui's voice was heard indistinctly from afar. It seemed that after the cries, there was a surprise sound, but very soon, Xiao Hui was silent, and that lingering, resentful song also slowly stopped. In the dark cave, the surroundings were strangely silent, as if there was something watching their figures in the darkness. Ghostly's eyes slowly became clear, staring at the darkness ahead. Jean Pinger instead seemed uneasy. That song just now made her uncomfortable, and right now the eerie, unknown darkness instinctively made her feel repulsed. She subconsciously took a step closer to Ghostly, was about to speak when suddenly a bright light flashed in the darkness. Almost at the same time, Ghostly and Jean Pinger's countenances changed. The difference was Ghostly was startled. Jean Pinger instead seemed to heave a sigh of relief. A faint white light flashed in the darkness, swiftly flew out, shot towards the light where the two of them were. Ghostly stood without moving. As expected, that white light passed by him, headed straight for Jean Pinger. Jean Pinger smiled coldly. To her, the enemy's sudden attack did not seem to bother her. What she was more concerned about was instead the unknown silence just now. That white light in a blink was before her. Jean Pinger's face turned cold, a light sound from her mouth. Her right hand flipped. Immediately a purple light lit up in Ghostly's soul-devouring green light circle. A faint green-purple light carrying a dreamy feeling swept past, struck down from the air, accurately struck that white light. Pah! That white light was actually cut into two by Jean Pinger's purple light magical weapon. Split into two, flew out to both sides. Just that it had not flown 6 chi away, the two white lights brightened again. The originally shrunken body abruptly returned to its original size. It was like two strange white halos appeared at the same time, whistling and spiraling back. At the same time, a sharp whistling sound suddenly sounded in the air. The speed was actually more than doubled. Jean Pinger's originally relaxed and calm face changed. She snorted. The purple light blade rose again, but two rays of purple light almost at the same time. The white object that was flying again was also cut into two halves by her, becoming four, powerlessly flew out. Just that strange white light, like an evil spirit, after flying out for a short distance, again brightened, swiftly returned to its original size, turned into 4 white objects of the same size, again swiftly shot towards Jean Pinger, this time with even more speed. Jean Pinger's face finally darkened, revealing a dignified expression. She retreated, but in this deep cave there was not much space. Very soon Jean Pinger was surrounded by these strange white halos, only to hear Jean Pinger's clear shout. Purple light flashed. Those white lights were quickly struck down or sent flying by Jean Pinger, but these little things were really strange. Almost after a moment, they recovered and once again ruthlessly attacked Jean Pinger. At the same time, the white light bodies that were split by Jean Pinger became more and more. Slowly, Jean Pinger's figure was covered by them. Looking from afar, the white halos danced and lingered, like slowly weaving into a light cocoon, about to trap Jean Pinger in it. Ghostly, who was standing beside, saw Jean Pinger was finding it more and more difficult to deal with these mysterious white lights, but did not make a move. But one could imagine that mysterious person in the darkness had yet to appear. With just this skill, he was able to entangle Jean Pinger to such a state. It could be seen that this person's evil skill was very strong. It was really not a small matter. Most likely it was the mysterious evildoer that the ferocious black tiger mentioned. Watching Jean Pinger's situation gradually becoming critical, but for some reason, although the white lights were increasing in number and intensity, Jean Pinger was still able to persevere. The white lights attacked more and more urgently. The momentum became louder and louder in the vast cave. Right now, the white light had already overpowered the original soul-devouring green light. The whistling sounds in the air also became louder and louder. Watching Jean Pinger was also gradually in dire straits, but she was still able to persevere, just that nobody knew how long more she could hold on. Ghostly suddenly moved, but he did not fly towards Jean Pinger. Instead, he charged into the darkness. Almost at the same time he moved, the soul-devouring green light which had been enveloping him instantly extinguished. The next moment, he blended into the darkness. His figure could no longer be seen. Far away, a cold snort seemed to be heard. In the familiar darkness, cold air drifted everywhere. Far away, the strange lights attacking Jean Pinger were heard howling sounds, but nearby, it was instead a strange silence. Suddenly, the calm ground began to tremble violently. Even the stone walls of the cave began to shake. After a loud noise came from the top of the cave, countless small stones and sand began to fall slowly. It was a blurry scene. Amidst the rumbling sounds, chaos appeared everywhere, and the darkness seemed to become thicker and thicker. At this moment, the falling stones suddenly stopped in mid-air, and for a moment, it was as if time had stopped and everything was still. After a moment, a sharp whistle suddenly sounded, and all the stones and dust gathered into a huge torrent, rumbling as it rushed toward a certain place in the darkness. That current's momentum was astonishing. Along the way, it was like toppling the mountains and overturning the seas. Nothing could stop it. It was about to reach the end of the darkness. Suddenly, in the darkness, a fair and slender hand stretched out. The index finger and little finger of the palm were erected. The ring finger was half bent. The thumb and middle finger were gently intertwined, impressively forming a seal similar to that of the Buddhist sect, but did not have the slightest dignified aura of the Buddhist sect. Instead, it was more of an indescribable, seductive demonic charm and dense demonic power. Invisible chi instantly condensed on the seal formed by the hand. In that instant, the palm seemed to have expanded countless times, like a giant palm that forcibly blocked the torrent. In the next moment, when one looked closely, they discovered that the palm was still the same slender palm, and nothing had changed. Just that once unstoppable current was blocked in the air, a deafening sound, numerous huge stones lost their momentum, crashed down. Instantly, sand flew up. Ghost Lee's disappeared figure suddenly flashed out from the flying sand and stones, like lightning pounced towards that hand. That fair hand's seal changed, for fingers half-curled, the thumb clasped horizontally and pressed down. Almost at the same time, Jean Pinger whistled. The purple light, which was suppressed by the white light bodies, suddenly exploded, like a purple halo bursting out. For a moment, the light shone brightly. But it did not look like Jean Pinger had broken through the white light suppression. On the contrary, her expression was extremely ugly, and right now the strange white light, which had already dispersed into innumerable spots scattered and again gathered together, formed into an enormous white light wall. In the blink of an eye, like a blazing wall of light, with a raging wave like speed charged towards Ghostly from behind. The light wave had yet to reach him. Ghostly's breathing had already stopped. His body, which was flying in the air, also swayed. It could be seen how powerful that light wave was. If he was hit by it, there was a possibility of him being smashed into pieces. Just that Ghostly's expression did not change, as if he did not care about that dangerous white huge wave behind him. His body sped up towards that fair hand. Just that although he was fast, that light wave was really like lightning from far to near, like a raging wave was already behind him, looking like it was about to swallow him up. Jean Pinger, who was far away, could not help but softly exclaimed. And in the darkness, that fair hand seemed to tremble slightly. And at this moment, Ghostly's left hand suddenly stretched out, thumb clasping tightly to his palm, middle finger half bent, 3 fingers straight like a mountain, formed an orthodox Buddhist Vajra seal. Looking at his palm, slowly pushing out, the image was solemn and solemn, giving one a feeling of being as dignified as a mountain. This pushing force was the power of Buddha's great benevolence, using his great power to move the mountain. In the silence there was thunder. In the darkness there was a great radiance. In an instant, the solemn golden light in the palm surged. Buddhist incantations flashed past. That raging wave-like light wall arrived with a rumble, abruptly collided with that palm, which had formed the seal. Boom! Like a meteor crashing to the ground, rumbling far away, the cave lit up with a strange light. Colorful lights dazzled, as if in that instant innumerable colorful eyes opened at the same time, glimmering, captivating one's soul. That white light wall dispersed with a loud rumble, like meteors raining down. Only the darkness in front of him remained the same. Chapter 389. Ghostly was already in front of that palm. He stretched out his hand, right hand grabbed toward that palm. The fair hand flipped up, did not retreat. The 5 fingers suddenly turned into a claw, met it in the air. Ghostly's right hand flashed past in an instant, avoided the sharp blade-like fingertips, grabbed towards the fair hand's wrist. That mysterious figure's palm flipped, actually flashed past in the blink of an eye. Instead, his fingers, like a knife, cut towards Ghostly's right hand base. In the blink of an eye, the palms of the 2 people in midair were as fast as lightning, flashing as fast as light. Each move was an extremely sharp killer move against the enemy, but they were all dodged by the opponent, and the counterattack was even more ferocious. Just that in this instant, there was not a single sound. The 2 of them had fought to this stage. Life and death seemed to be within a breath's time, but their palms had never touched. Until the meteor shower behind him finally fell completely. Darkness suddenly descended once more, covering all the light. Deep in the darkness, a light sound was suddenly heard. Pah! The sound was crisp and low, faintly heard, without any murderous aura, but like when we were together in childhood, the sound of 2 hands gently clapping. And then, everything returned to silence. Grab that hand. He held it, that hand. What he felt, there was no murderous aura, no evil power, only softness and gentleness. Like suddenly, the sky and earth were spinning, flying past thousands of mountains and rivers. Blue sea and blue sky were all embraced into his arms. Those gentle figures were all beside him, never left. Just like that, a lifetime of joy, a laugh, passed by carefreely. Wasn't this fairyland? Could this be life? From now on, drunk, never to wake up. Could it be even better? The faint darkness seemed to be tempting someone. Just that, he suddenly opened his eyes in the darkness, both eyes like blood, facing the sky with a long howl. That palm suddenly shook, retracted back. Ghostly's entire body glowed with green light. The soul-absorbing stick instantly appeared in his hand. The sinister orb at the tip of the orb's dark red color all lit up. Evil energy billowed towards the deepest part of the darkness, pierced in. Noiselessly, That space suddenly froze, the entire darkness like solidified into solid rock. Indestructible, but the soul-absorbing stick was blunt and blunt. For some reason, that extremely strong, evil power boundary had no effect on it, was pierced by the soul-absorbing stick like a hot knife through butter. Finally, someone slightly angrily snorted. That dark boundary instantly dispersed. A human figure flew back one jong, dodging the soul-devouring's unstoppable stab. Just that in a blink, Ghost Lee's figure like a shadow pasted over. That mysterious figure did not disperse and did not look panicked, instead stretched out a hand. This time the fingers closed, clenched into a delicate fist, struck towards Ghostly. Ghostly's countenance instead changed slightly. His body immediately paused, frowning slightly. The red light in his eyes suddenly dissipated. Even the soul-absorbing stick also instantly disappeared from his hand. His chest was wide open, both of his hands raised up, facing that ordinary delicate fist, slowly drew down in the air, dignified like a mountain, light like flowing water. The next moment, a gentle clear light floated up between his arms in the air. Slowly appeared a Taiji diagram. Taiji Xianqing Wei. That fist struck up, hit right in the middle of the Taiji diagram, slowly sank in, causing this Taiji diagram to cave inwards. Ghost Lee's face turned slightly pale. It seemed that in that instant his breathing also stopped, but the next moment that Taiji diagram in the air slowly started to spin, and the place where the fist had sunk in, although tightened but did not stop, on the contrary, as the spin gradually sped up, that silent, enormous evil power was being softened by this Taoism supreme, true way's flexible power, bit by bit dissolved. The Taiji diagram spun faster and faster. Even that hand also started to tremble. That mysterious figure snorted again, but this time his voice sounded slightly pained. Evidently, the Taiji Xianqing Wei's counterattack power was not to be underestimated. Oh, a low whistle. The Taiji diagram dispersed, and that fair hand also retracted back into the darkness, as if there was a moment of tranquility. Suddenly, Ghostly flew up. The deep darkness ahead seemed to not be able to obstruct him, as if even in the darkness, he still had a pair of eyes hidden in his heart, slowly seeing the path ahead. That mysterious figure in the darkness was retreating, his movements swift, but Ghostly pursued closely. The two of them in this ancient cave, in that deepest darkness, flew faster and faster, transformed into two lightning in the darkness, flashed past the deepest part of the cave. This flight seemed to be endless. The darkness in front of him was like a ferocious beast baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Then, it fell behind him in an instant. Even further away, there were countless unknown darkness waiting for him. The strong wind was like a knife. In that split second, who did you think of? That pursuit was like life, never stopping, just that in the end, not knowing if you were lost or forgot your original intention, not knowing how much time had passed, not knowing how much distance had been covered, only that along the way, the terrain was slowly descending, as if they were already deep underground, and behind them was only silence. Jean Pinger had long been shaken off by them, nowhere to be seen. That mysterious figure suddenly stopped, turned around in the darkness, facing the direction where he came from. Ghostly immediately noticed this movement. His figure paused and also slowly stopped. In the darkness, the two of them faced each other. For a moment, did not speak. The next moment, Ghost Lee's dark green halo once again lit up, illuminating the surroundings. Just at the darkness ahead, the lights seemed to be unable to shine in. That mysterious figure suddenly said, "Good power." The voice sounded gentle and pleasant, although it was spoken indifferently, but for some reason, it made one's heart palpitate. Ghostly, under the faint dark green light, stared at that darkness, his face calm, his tone was also calm, totally not like he had just gone through a soul-stirring battle with this person, said, "You flatter me." That female voice sneered, said, "In the battle just now, in a flash, you combined evil, sect way, Tianyin Temple Great Brahmin Wisdom Buddha way, and Qing Yun Sect Tai, Ji Xianqing way, Taoism True way. the 3 sects first-class true way cultivation and used it according to the situation. There was not the slightest hesitation when switching. It can be seen that you have completely mastered it. And the 3 sects cultivation are not to be underestimated. Just that Tai Chi Xin Xing Wei cultivation is so powerful. I'm afraid other than that old man Dao Xian. Even in Qing Yun's sect, no one can match you. She slowly paused for a moment and then said word by word, "Your skills, how did you improve so quickly?" Ghostly did not speak, only looked at that darkness, suddenly smiled and slowly said, "Why, my cultivation is smooth. Do you find it very strange?" In the dark shadows, suddenly a few familiar cries were heard. The next moment, a figure scurried out. Looking carefully, gray fur, long tail, it was the monkey Xiao Hui. It grinned, scratched its head, hopped twice on the ground and returned to Ghost Li's side, scurried up his shoulder, and then sat down, its tail still wagging and wagging. That female in the darkness did not speak, became silent. Ghostly looked at that darkness. Emotion slowly appeared in his eyes. His voice also seemed to become gentler, smiled and said, "It is you, right? I really did not expect to meet you here." That female who was hidden in the darkness suddenly spat, said, "Do you still remember me? Don't you have such an enchanting woman beside you?" Ghostly was surprised, couldn't help but felt embarrassed, smiled bitterly and said, "What nonsense are you talking about?" That female was clearly annoyed, coldly said, "By doing this, aren't you afraid of letting down that person who is still lying on the ice bed?" Ghostly shook his head and said, "You misunderstood. I don't know this place. It was Ghost King's sect leader who ordered her to lead the way." He paused for a moment, indifferently said, "What kind of person I am, it's not like you don't know." That female in the darkness snorted, but obviously she was not that angry anymore, said, "How would I know what kind of person you are? I only know that there are never good men." Ghostly frowned, shook his head slightly, smiled bitterly, and did not answer. The darkness ahead slowly dispersed. Under the illumination of Ghost Li's soul, devouring green light, a human figure slowly appeared. Xiao Hui, who was on Ghost Li's shoulder, grinned and called out a few times to that graceful figure, very affectionate. In the dim light, that female was alluring, gentle, and charming. If it was not that long-missing nine-tailed celestial fox Xiao Bai, who else could it be? Chapter 390. Central Plains, outside Heiyang City, abandoned morgue. In the wilderness, at a glance, the terrain was relatively flat. Other than looking to the north, there was a towering Qingyan mountain range. The rest of the directions, even the undulating hills, were rare. Many trees grew haphazardly far and near, big or small, scattered on this wilderness. Around the morgue, there were also a few sparse trees standing. The sky was at its darkest. In addition, the clouds were very thick, blocking the moon. Only a few small stars at the edge emitted weak light, shining on this desolate land. That night, the wind started to blow. It wasn't particularly strong, but when it blew past the treetops, the branches swayed and shadows flashed, emitting a low rustling sound. Listening to it and blowing on the body, it felt especially cold. Tanis Ka, Xiao Huan, and Wild Dog Taoist stood closely together, watching that mysterious person in front. From the time Zhou Yixian discovered that person, it had been a while, but that person was like a zombie, standing there without moving. Just that he blocked the door, Zhou Yixian and the other two could not go out. Xiao Huan composed herself, lowered her voice, softly said to Tanis Ka, "Grandfather, you really saw clearly. He is wearing Qing Yun's sect Taoist robe." Wild Dog Taoist also turned his head, listened attentively. Tanis Yixian glanced at that wooden figure, then nodded his head and said, "Can't be wrong. Look at the sword insignia on his sleeve. It is indeed Qing Yun's sect." Xiao Huan muttered, "Isn't Qing Yun's sect a reputable good faction sect? Why would they come to this ghastly place in the middle of the night to scare people?" Wild Dog Taoist also nodded. Clearly even he who had never liked the good faction also did not believe that Qing Yun's sect disciples would do such things. Tanis Ka rolled his eyes at them, coughed once. No matter what, although he was shocked when he first discovered that figure, but after a while, that strange figure, although still mysterious, did not do anything to harm or antagonize them. Tanis Ka could not help but grow a little braver. He slowly took a step forward, laughed dryly twice, said, This. Mister, please forgive us for offending you. We did not know that this is your residence. Grandfather, Xiao Huan called out from behind. Interrupted Tanis Ka. Her tone was slightly annoyed, and the figure in front suddenly moved, seemed to have some reaction to Tanis Ka's words. Tanis Ka frowned, but immediately reacted. This was a morgue. If he said this was the residence of this person, wouldn't it be the same as calling him a dead person or a ghost? Tanis Ka couldn't help but felt a chill down his spine, quickly smiled and said, This old man is saying, the three of us are taking a stroll in the middle of the night, accidentally came to this place. There is no other intention. Mister, please don't mind. We didn't see anything. We're leaving. After speaking, he turned and winked at Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist. The three of them braced themselves and slowly moved to the side, thinking to walk past this ghost-like figure. Unexpectedly, after a few steps, the three of them felt a blur in front of them. That black figure was actually blocking in front of them again, and the distance was even closer. Xiao Huan could even faintly smell a bloody stench from that person. Looking at the dark and windy sky above their heads, a black mass of shadow swept past. Tanis Ka, Wild Dog Taoist's countenance changed. Xiao Huan even paled with a cry, jumped back a few steps, eager to get as far away from that black figure as possible. Xiao Huan cried out, although it was her own subconscious cry. As a young girl, she would always be disgusted by these things, but in the ears of others, it was a different matter. Tanis Ka and Wild Dog Taoist were startled. Tanis Ka quickly looked back. Wild Dog Taoist instead gathered his courage with a tiger roar, and more like a dog bark, jumped out, stood in front of Xiao Huan and Tanis Ka. At the same time, a halo flashed in his hand. He had already brandished out his own Beast Fong magical weapon. In the darkness of the night, that faint yellow halo, although weak, but it seemed to have some warmth. Xiao Huan saw Wild Dog Taoist like that. She herself was also startled, did not understand. In that instant, that figure whose face was always shrouded in the shadows suddenly swayed. That person's hand stretched out straight ahead. A gush of strange energy followed, but it was definitely not Qing Yun's sex honorable way. Wild Dog Taoist knew in his heart that this person was unfathomable, but there was a lady standing behind him. No matter what, he could not retreat. Immediately, with an angry shout, the beast tooth magical weapon immediately shone brightly, striking towards that person. In the moor courtyard, the darkness seemed to be forced back by Wild Dog Taoist. On his face, for that instant, seeing that the figure did not seem to resist, he also looked stunned and even more delighted. The next moment, Wild Dog Taoist's Beast Fong magical weapon hit solidly on that figure's chest. That mysterious and extremely powerful figure did not evade Wild Dog Taoist's heavy blow. Wild Dog Taoist himself could not believe it. Tanis Ka and Xiao Huan were also stunned. Ahead of them, the Beast Fong magical weapon glowed with yellow light, with a victorious spirit, just that after a moment, the three of them realized something was wrong. That person who was hit in the chest by Wild Dog Taoist's full strength did not even waver, although Wild Dog Taoist's skills were far from ghostly in the rest, but he was after all an evil sect figure who had cultivated for many years. The power of this blow was not to be underestimated. Ordinary people would most likely be hit until their blood and chi were in turmoil. Even if they did not die, they would at least lose half their lives. And this strange figure did not seem to feel anything. Closely following that person seemed to quietly snort. Wild Dog Taoist suddenly exclaimed. Without seeing how that person moved, that outstretched hand instantly returned to him, grabbed Wild Dog Taoist's Beast Fong magical weapon in his hand. His own magical weapon being held by someone. This was an extremely dangerous thing to a cultivator. How could Wild Dog Taoist not be anxious and angry? With a shout, exerted all his power, wanted to call the magical weapon back. Unexpectedly, that Beast Fong was lying in that person's hand. Without seeing how he exerted any strength, it did not react to its master's power. That person lowered his head, looked at the thing in his hand, and then spoke for the first time. His voice was hoarse, almost inaudible, but with an obvious disdainful tone. Coldly said, "Evil small Taoist, also dare to be presumptuous here." Wild Dog Taoist was shocked and was about to summon his magical weapon again. Suddenly, he heard Tanis Ka's anxious voice behind him. "Retreat! Quickly retreat!" Wild Dog Taoist was shocked, instinctively retreated a few steps, was about to question Zhou Yixian when that person's hand suddenly tightened. That beast-tooth magical weapon almost made an ear-piercing sound like broken bones. Wild Dog Taoist was shocked, but the yellow light surged and then immediately dissipated in the sounds like the last moans of a ferocious beast struggling in pain. But a sound, Wild Dog Taoist's magical weapon Beast-Tooth, was actually crushed by that person's bare hands. The fragments like knives shot out, the sounds, in that instant incessant, all hit the place where Wild Dog Taoist was standing just now. Wild Dog Taoist felt heartache and fear. For a moment, could not speak. That strange person's face was still shrouded by a ball of mysterious shadow. The three of them could not see his face clearly. His voice was low and hoarse. He slowly looked up at the sky, but the black shadow on his face still did not retreat. Unspeakably strange. After destroying this beast Fong, he seemed to have a feeling of venting, slowly sneered, in their ears against this strange morgue. The whistling wind in the sky. Tanis Ka and the rest all felt their blood run cold. Tanis Ka was feeling uneasy. Suddenly his eyes focused, looked at that strange person's arm. The hand that crushed the beast Fong unknowingly had a layer of faint cyan light, and that cyan light was completely different from this person's aura, pure and gentle. It was actually the purest Taoist true way realm. Tanis Ka raised his head in shock, took a step forward. For a moment he forgot his worries, ignored Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist who were trying to stop him, said, "Who exactly are you?" Wearing Qing Yun sect Taoist robe and cultivated Tai Chi Xianxing Wei, not lower than Shangqing realm, which Qing Yun sect master actually did such an absurd thing at this time. The cyan light flashed and retracted. That person slowly looked at Tanis Ka through the layer of strange black air on his face. Tanis Ka felt a chill all over his body. That person's hoarse voice coldly said, "You really know quite a lot." Tanis Ka snorted, his face solemn, kept sizing up that person. The puzzlement on his face became heavier and heavier. In a deep voice said, "You are indeed from Qing Yun's sect, and definitely not an ordinary disciple. But who exactly are you? For what reason? Making trouble here?" That person sneered but did not answer. Tanis Ka suddenly sensed something, turned back and looked. It was Xiao Huan gently pulling his sleeve, quietly said, "Grandpa, this person is covered with ghost energy. I can feel there is not a single wandering nether spirit in this morgue. Most likely they were all scared away by this person. If not, I would have known something was wrong here. This kind of person, how can he be from Qingyun's sect?" Chapter 391. Tanis Ka's face was uncertain, his expression complicated. Obviously his thoughts were also in a mess. Facing this mysterious person who was linked to Qing Yun's sect in countless ways, he did not seem to be afraid like usual, and instead seemed to be lost in his thoughts. That mysterious person's attention right now slowly focused on Tanis Ka, assessed Tanis Ka from top to bottom, suddenly sneered, coldly said, "I don't care who you are. If you dare to go against me, you will all have to die." Once he finished, his hand was already raised. Tanis Ka saw the green light in his hand instantly lit up. His old face turned pale. Without even time to speak, both of his hands suddenly waved, raised to his chest. Between his left and right index and middle fingers, a piece of yellow talisman paper appeared. On it were curved, crookedly drawn with strange talismans, slightly fluttering in the wind. The green light in the mysterious person's hand gradually brightened and aimed at Tanis Ka and the rest. Tanis Ka did not hesitate, suddenly muttered an incantation, did not retreat but advanced, took a step forward. As he took a step, following his incantation, the two yellow talisman papers actually burned by themselves. Two small balls of fire in this dark night suddenly appeared, looked especially bright. This strange action seemed to have caused the mysterious man on the other side to hesitate, or perhaps it had triggered some of his memories. It actually caused his movements to pause for a moment, and he vaguely let out a surprised, "Huh?" The talisman papers burned. Tanis Ka's white beard fluttered. Suddenly he shouted. Both hands swung. Two balls of fire floated out from his fingers, actually condensed in the air. Immediately after a loud sound, the two balls of fire expanded with the wind, became a ball of several chi, big raging fire, blocking between Tanis Ka and the mysterious person. Hoa! A roar came from the sky, and a huge white tiger jumped out from the raging flames. It was full of vigor, and it opened its bloody mouth and let out a roar that shook the surroundings. It jumped up with a loud bang and pounced towards the black shadow. The mysterious man snorted coldly and didn't retreat at all. His right hand flashed with a green light as he chopped down. No matter how ferocious the giant tiger was, this palm strike landed on the giant tiger's forehead. The green light instantly corroded the white tiger's forehead. The white tiger seemed to be struggling, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, but after a moment, it let out a final, unwilling roar. The giant tiger's entire body suddenly shone with a green light. Then it shook for a while, and this huge body unexpectedly disappeared into thin air. It turned into a few remnant flames that flickered twice in the air before disappearing without a trace. But this was not the end of the white tiger. Almost at the same time the huge tiger disappeared, in that huge ball of flames, a red-maned lion, in the lion's roar, again pounced towards the mysterious person. But the mysterious person's skills were obviously extremely high, almost did not even look straight at it. Again with the same palm strike, that lion's outcome was the same as the white tiger. Just that the special skill that Zhou Yixian displayed this time was really strange. Although the transformed huge beast could not withstand one hit from the enemy. But in that ball of raging fire, who knows how many strange beasts transformed by mana? After the huge tiger and lion, that ball of fire transformed more and more ferocious beasts, and their speed also became faster and faster. All kinds of beasts like wild boar, leopard, hippopotamus, giant elephant, spiritual deer, mountain cat, etc., emerged one after another, and their bodies were all extraordinarily majestic, extremely ferocious. But this time facing that mysterious person seemed to really have supernatural skills. Facing these beasts that came one after another, too many for the eyes to take in, he did not even breathe heavily, only seemed to casually wave his arm. Wherever his palm passed, even the most ferocious beasts also turned into nothingness. In the midst of the fierce battle, the mysterious man suddenly snorted coldly. As if he had sensed something, he abruptly changed his palm strike into a sweep. Immediately, green light flourished, and a bright light, like a wheel, directly crushed over. His imposing manner was forceful and invincible. When the ball of raging flames encountered the green light pillar, it resisted for a while before it was finally pierced through and passed through. In the midair, there seemed to be thousands of beasts roaring in anger at the same time, but then it stopped, the flames disappeared, in the flickering light, only two yellow talismans that were about to be burnt out slowly floated down from the midair. In the courtyard of the morgue, temporarily returned to peace, and on the other side of the courtyard, Tanis Ka and the other two who had just sneaked to the corner of the wall, turned back in shock, obviously did not expect that the enemy could so quickly break Tanis Ka's spell. Without the illusion spell to block, running away with one's back was obviously a laughable and stupid idea. Tanis Ka and the other two stopped for a moment, slowly turned back. And that mysterious person slowly approached, slowly walked over. The black figure with thick murderous aura inside the morgue, it was a scene of killing. Tanis Ka's brows tightly frowned, obviously worried about something. But seeing the black figure coming closer, he felt that his life and death was within a breath's time. Tani's countenance changed, suddenly wanted to step forward to counter, but before she could, she was already pulled back by Tanis Ka. Quietly scolded, "Nonsense, this person is not to be trifled with, not someone that a child like you can handle." Xiao Huan was slightly surprised, looked at Zhou Yixian in astonishment, as if she had never seen her grandfather so nervous and cautious. At this moment, the approaching shadow paused, a hoarse voice coldly said, "The illusion that you used just now, is it?" Halfway through, Tanis Ka suddenly, as if disregarding everything, both of his arms abruptly waved up, this time appearing in his palms, were as many as 8 pieces of yellow talisman paper. The night breeze blew. The 8 talisman paper spontaneously combusted at the same time, specks of flame, like dancing wildly on Tanniska's palms, illuminating his eyes. "Hey, ghosts of wooding, quickly return to the yellow spring. Shadow form escape, it is my command." Almost at the same time Tanniska's shout, inside the morgue, suddenly a gale blew. Sand and stones blew in from all directions. That mysterious person paused, seemed surprised, attentively looked around. Tanniska's incantation came out. In the air, 5 muffled sounds were heard. Tanniska and the other two's figures faintly swayed for a moment, then stopped. The gale howled, rolled up the yellow sand, blew towards that mysterious person. His clothes fluttered. But in the gale, the black air on his face did not move. Instead, a cold laugh came out again. That person actually gave up the 3 who were casting, suddenly retreated 6 steps. With a light shout, his left hand stabbed towards the ground. A dark green halo instantly stabbed down. The hard ground immediately exploded for some reason. In the flickering dark green light, Tanniska and the other two's figures suddenly started to tremble violently, and under the ground, a cry with pain was suddenly heard. "Aya!" The dark green light flashed inside the morgue. The gale reduced greatly. The sand and stones also gradually calmed down. After a moment, where Tanniska and the other 2 were standing, the ground suddenly exploded, followed by a loud bang. A big hole was blasted open. The 3 standing figures suddenly disappeared. Unknowingly, they had already become illusions. And in the big hole on the ground, with a few cries in pain, 3 figures staggered out. Who else could it be but Tanniska and the other 2? The faces of the 3 were covered with dust. Tanniska's face was green and purple. Obviously, he was at a disadvantage. But he didn't seem to have time to care about this. Only raised his head to look at the mysterious person. His face was stunned. That strange and mysterious person coldly stood in the distance, staring at them. He snorted and said in a hoarse voice, "I didn't expect you to actually know the golden armor of 5 ding and little ghost transportation, these long-lost spells. Moreover, you can actually use these 2 great special spells together with the earth burrowing at the same time. I almost underestimated you. Just based on these special spells, I'm afraid there is no one in the world who can surpass you." Tanniska's face was solemn, although he looked comical, but right now he solemnly said, "How did you see through it?" That person indifferently said, "Didn't you say I am from Qin Yun's sect? These Jianghu small spells were Qin Yun's sect founder's special skills. Even if I don't know it, can I see through it?" Tanniska slowly stood up. Thoughts flashed in his mind. This time, facing this mysterious person, he really felt that he could not deal with him. Not to mention his unfathomable skills. Looking at the world, it would be difficult to find someone who could fight against this person. What was even more puzzling was that this person seemed to be from Qin Yun's sect, and his cultivation in Tai Chi Xianqing Wei was high, rarely seen in his life. But this person's vicious energy was also never seen before. How could there be such a person, and why would he appear in this morgue in the middle of the night? Chapter 392. Qin Yun Hill, Big Bamboo Valley. Outside Observe Silence Hall, Big Bamboo Valley disciples from Xavion to do Baishu stood in a line outside the door. Their faces were anxious and worried, looking into the hall from time to time. After a while, footsteps were heard in the hall. A lady walked out. It was Small Bamboo Valley's One Min. Xavion and the rest of the Big Bamboo Valley disciples immediately surrounded her. Xavion and One Min were familiar with each other. Seeing that there was no one behind One Min, quietly asked, "How is my teacher's wife?" One Min nodded, softly said, "Su teacher uncle is fine now. Just now, when we returned to the mountain, she suddenly fainted. Heard from my teacher that it was because she was too worried. Now my teacher is accompanying her inside. She has already woken up." Xavion and the rest all heaved a sigh of relief at the same time, but on their faces, no one could turn happy. Du Baishu, with a bitter face, said, "This is really a bolt from the blue. There is no news of teacher. This time, even teacher's wife almost got into trouble to shut up." Xavion frowned and shouted. Du Baishu smiled bitterly, shook his head, and did not speak. Xavion turned to One Min, said, "Did my teacher's wife ask you to instruct us anything?" One Min shook her head, said, "No. Su teacher uncle only spoke softly with my teacher. After a few words, my teacher let me come out too. Seemed like there is something that she does not want me to know." Xavion frowned, said, This. One Min saw him anxious. Her heart could not bear it. Advised, Song's senior brother, "Don't be too anxious. Anyway, it is not a big matter. Isn't there still Su teacher uncle and my teacher? Now that there's an unforeseen event, Su teacher uncle seems to be mentally and physically exhausted. The burden here must be shouldered by you." Xavion sighed, nodded and said, "What you said is right." After pondering for a moment, he turned to the other junior brothers and said, all right. Since we know that teacher's wife is safe, I say everyone don't need to keep standing here. If not, if teacher's wife finds out, it will instead add to her troubles. Everyone, go back to your rooms first. You still have to do your homework. I'll keep it here for now." Wudi, Hidaji, and Du Baishu looked at each other. After a moment of silence, second brother Wu Doi nodded, said, "That's good too. We will listen to the Shixiao." After speaking, he turned to Song Darren, said, "To Shixiao, later I will come and replace you." Song Darren wanted to shake his head and refuse, but Hidaji patted his shoulder and said, "Eldest Shixiao, you told us to take a good rest, but you shouldn't act carelessly. Shenyang won't like you like this." Song Darren bitterly smiled and nodded. The crowd gradually dispersed, leaving only Xavion and One Min standing outside the hall, speechless. Both of them looked at each other. One Min suddenly blushed and slowly lowered her head. Xavion coughed once, felt his heart beating faster, quickly calmed himself down, laughed dryly, and said, "Junior sister, didn't you just go to the southern border with your small bamboo valley Lu Sweki? Why are you back so soon?" One Min shook her head and said, "I did go to the southern border. Initially, I did not intend to return so early, but something strange happened there. After discussing with Lu Junior sister, we felt that it was not a small matter. So I rushed back first to report to teacher and the elders. Lu Junior sister will stay in the southern border and act according to the circumstances." Xavion was surprised, said, "What is it? Why is it so important?" One Min hesitated for a moment, looked around, and then went near Xavion, whispered a few words in his ear. Not waiting for her to finish, Xavion's countenance changed, waited for One Min to finish, and then left his side, stood in front of him and looked at him, quietly sighed, and said, "Now you know why I rushed back." Song Darren's face was cloudy. After a while, he said, "This is really a troubled time." One Min was silent for a long time, quietly said, "Who says it isn't? I also feel that before one wave subsides, another wave rises. And after my return, this kind of thing actually happened in our sect. AI?" She sighed and didn't say anything more. Xavion stood with her and suddenly felt that the woman beside him was thin and looked a little more delicate. He couldn't help but slowly stand closer. One Min was deep in thought, seemed to not feel anything, but her lips moved slightly, but she did not speak, just quietly stood there. Two figures, just like that, quietly stood outside Big Bamboo Peak, observed Silence Hall. Far away, Big Bamboo Valley bamboo rustled. The warm sunlight shone down in the azure blue sky. It was a beautiful scene with no clouds for thousands of miles, gently watching this world. Observed Silence Hall backyard. In a secluded bedroom, two women sat facing each other. Shuewa Master was silent for a long time, said, "Junior sister, why don't you go lie on the bed for a while?" Suru slowly shook her head. Although she looked tired, but her tone was still determined and deep, said, "I'm not going. Even if I go, I will not be able to sleep." Shuewa Master sighed, said, "Junior sister, don't worry too much, like what I said to you just now. No matter what, Tian Bui and sect head senior brother disappear at the same time. You did not see him really encounter. Whatever accident, don't let your imagination run wild. Moreover, although Xian Shixiang is not behaving well recently, but his cultivation is high, far above us. His determination is also the same. Tian Belize is his shitty for many years. He will definitely not act recklessly." Suru was silent, her eyes slightly red again. Shuewa Master shook her head, stood up, paced a few steps in the room, clearly also feeling perturbed. The current Qing Yun's sect's chaotic situation, even the ordinary disciples could see it, not to mention these elders who more or less knew some inside information. Suru forced a smile, diverted the topic, said, "Senior sister, why did you suddenly come to Tongtian Peak today?" Shuiwen Master, in a bad mood, said, "Isn't it all because of Funxiang Valley Yun Elon's trivial matter? Originally wanted to discuss with sect head senior brother, didn't expect such a big matter to happen. In the end, even the dignified sect head actually disappeared." Suru frowned, said, "Funxiang Valley head Yun Elon? What matter does he have that concerns our Qing Yun?" Shuiwen Master sneered, said, "My sect disciples Lu Sueki and One Min went to southern border to investigate the whereabouts of the demon beasts. You know about it, right?" Suru nodded, said, "I know, I was just wondering, why did One Min return so quickly, following beside you? That Lu Sueki also returned?" Shuiwen Master shook her head, said, "Sueki has not returned yet. This time after their discussion, it was One Min who returned first to report to me." Suru said, "What happened?" Shuiwen Master said, "When they went to southern border to visit that Yun Elon suddenly asked them if our Qing Yun sect's Zhuxian ancient sword is already damaged." Suru's countenance changed greatly, said in shock, "What?" Shuiwen Master sneered and said, "You were also shocked. When I heard it, I was really shocked too. Yun Elon was thousands of miles away. How would he know such a big secret? That day, Daoxian senior brother had warned us few of our sect with disciples, as if guarding against thieves. It was because he was afraid that this matter would leak out. Do you still remember?" Suru was silent for a long time. The worry in her eyes deepened, sighed, and said, "This is really bad news spreading for thousands of miles." Shuiwen Master paced back and forth, said, "And have you ever thought, why would Yun Elon say such things to those juniors?" Suru slowly nodded, said, "I am also thinking about this. If it is because we are all from the good faction, he should not have mentioned it in front of everyone, and instead hide it for us. If not, he has ulterior motives, but he should hide it well. Waiting for the right opportunity is what people like him should do." "That's right," Shuiwen Master snorted, said, "the problem is here. Yun Elon, this old fellow, looked like he did a foolish thing that only an idiot would do. Did not please both sides, but we all know that this person is not an idiot, but a cunning old fox. But what exactly is he trying to do? It is really incomprehensible." Suru was deep in thought for a long time, suddenly rubbed her temples. Her face revealed a pained expression. Shuiwen Master was shocked, quickly walked over to support her, said self-reproachfully, "Look at me. You are already vexed enough. I still have to say these to you. All right, let's not talk about it. Let's not talk about it." Suru smiled bitterly, said, "AI, if it was in the past, with sect head senior brother presiding over the overall situation, we would not be afraid of these things, but now Qing Yun sect itself is in a mess. The situation outside is also extremely chaotic, not knowing how. Many enemies are eyeing us. Really don't know what to do." Shuiwen Master frowned, and then gently said, "Junior sister, don't say any more. Look how tired you are. Didn't I tell you, sect head senior brother these days, although his temper is strange, different from the past, but his skills and cultivation are divine, as well as firm. We do not need to be afraid of anything." Suru shook her head, casually said, "Senior sister, if you don't understand, sect head senior brother, although his skills are high, but Zhuxian ancient sword's ferocious energy, the stronger it is, although his skills are high. I'm afraid he has fallen even deeper into the devil." Shuiwen Master was surprised, said, "What did you say?" Suru was shocked, then realized she had spilled the beans and was about to cover it up. Shuiwen Master frowned deeply, walked to her, solemnly said, "Junior sister, what other secrets does that Zhuxian ancient sword have? You actually know about it. Quickly tell me." Chapter 393. Suru was silent for a long time, sighed and said, "Forget it. Since it has come to this, sooner or later I will not be able to hide it. Senior sister, I will tell you now. Actually, this was a matter from 100 years ago. Southern border, 100,000 mountains, deep in the Devil's Suppression Cave. Reuniting after such a long time, after the first words were said, Little White and Ghostly did not know what to say. Only the monkey Little Gray, who was lying on Ghostly's shoulder, seemed to be very happy to see Little White, grinning nonstop. Ghostly was suddenly startled. He seemed to have thought of something. He turned his head to look at the road, but it was only darkness. He couldn't help but frown. He said a shall by, "The woman who came with me, what did you do to her?" Little White snorted and said indifferently, "What can I do to her? You really have a lot of things to worry about." Ghostly was silent for a moment, and then he shook his head. He didn't want to be entangled in this topic, so he said, "Right, why are you here? After you left that day, I haven't had any news of you. When I came to the Southern Territory this time, I secretly investigated, but I was unable to find you." Whitey smiled. Her figure seemed to be swaying gently in the green light. As she swayed, she was full of moving charm. She said, "Didn't I tell you before I left? I'm going to find the 8 Evils mystical fire formation for you." Ghostly said, "I remember, so I also went to Fun Xiang Valley's mystical fire altar, but did not find anything. Oh, right, you haven't said why you came to this devil suppression cave." Little White shrugged and said, "I came here, naturally for that array, and also to see an old friend." Ghostly looked at her, muttered, and said, "You mean here?" Little White nodded. "That's right. After the array at Fun Xiang Valley's mystical fire altar was destroyed, in this world, only this devil suppression cave has an intact 8 ferocious mystical fire array, and my old friend is also here." Ghostly's face changed and said slowly, "That old friend you're talking about, could it be?" Little White smiled and said, "It's the king of beast demons that you all speak of, the beast god." Although Ghostly had more or less thought of it, when he heard Little White say it personally, he was still stunned. For a moment, he did not know what to say. After a long while, Ghostly slowly said, "How did you get acquainted with him?" Little White looked at him with a gentle smile on her face, but her eyes were as clear as water. However, there was a hint of mockery in her eyes as she said, "Don't you know? I'm an old demon. I'm old, so I naturally know more things and know more monsters." Ghostly was silent. Little White looked at him and said, "Then what about you? What are you doing here? You said that the Ghost King ordered that woman to bring you here. What is he up to?" Ghostly shook his head and said, "Ghost King's sect master did not order me to come here to hunt down the beast god." Little White was stunned and said, "If you're not here to kill him, then why did you come all the way here?" Ghostly said, "He wants me to subdue a strange beast by the beast god's side, Tao Tai, and bring it back to him." Tao Tai? Little White was stunned again. She frowned and thought for a moment before muttering to herself, "That's strange. When did he become interested in Tao Tai?" Ghostly said lightly, "I don't know about that. In any case, that's what he ordered. I'll just do as he says." Little White snorted and said, "That Tao Tai is a spiritual beast that never leaves the beast god's side. If you want to subdue it, you must go through the beast god. Do you have the confidence to win against the beast god? Or do you also think that he wants to hit you when you're down after being injured?" Ghostly looked at Little White and didn't say anything. After a moment, he suddenly smiled and walked past Little White, heading deeper into the darkness of the cave. Little White's expression changed slightly as she followed beside him and said, "What do you mean?" Little Gray, who was lying on Ghostly's shoulder, saw that Little White was beside him. With a hoo sound, it jumped down from Ghostly's shoulder and landed on Little White's body. Little White caught the monkey and hugged it to her chest. Rubbing its head, she couldn't help but have a bit of affection in her eyes. She then turned to look at Ghostly. Ghostly slowly said, "You know that as long as it's not too excessive, I will do what the sovereign orders me to do." Little White snorted and said, "Have you ever thought that if you do this yourself, you may feel better in your heart? But the things you have done all these years, I'm afraid that Bai Yao may not like you to do them." Ghostly's footsteps suddenly stopped. His whole body seemed to have stopped. Little White frowned and also stopped, but she didn't look at Ghostly. Instead, she lowered her head and looked at Little Gray, gently stroking its fur. Little Gray's 3 eyes blinked, as if he didn't understand. He looked at Little White for a while, then looked at his master for a while. Ghostly was silent for a while before whispering, "Since you know that doing this will make me feel better, why do you still say that?" Little White sighed and didn't say anything. Ghost Lee's figure suddenly seemed somewhat lonely. However, he stood in the faint green light and did not turn his head. It was as if he had long been used to it and never turned his head. He was silent for a long time before he finally said, "I have never done anything that offends the heavens and reason." After saying that, he didn't say another word and continued to walk forward. Looking at that figure, Little White was also silent. After a while, she looked at Little Gray in her arms and saw that the monkey's 3 eyes were looking at her. Little White smiled bitterly and said, "That master of yours, he actually didn't go crazy in these 10 years. It's really strange." The two figures walked for a long time in the depths of the suppressing devil ancient cave. Ghostly was not in a hurry, and Little White seemed to have a lot of thoughts in her mind. She didn't stop Ghostly from looking for the beast deity, nor did she open her mouth to point out the direction. She only walked behind him, deep in thought. Suddenly, Ghostly stopped in his tracks. In front of him, in the darkness, a faint green light suddenly lit up. It flickered continuously and shone several feet above the ground. And all around it was silent, not to mention breathing. There wasn't even the stench of those ferocious demonic beasts. At this moment, Little White, who was walking behind him, sighed and said, "We're here. There's a door under the green light in front of us. Past that door is a large stone room. The people and spirit beasts you're looking for are inside." Ghostly didn't say anything, but Little Gray looked at Little White's expression and suddenly jumped up. After a few jumps, he jumped back to Ghostly's shoulder and then turned back to smile at Little White and rubbed his head. Little White also smiled at Little Gray and then said to Ghostly, "Listen to me, I have a good relationship with the beast deity. So if you want me to help you deal with him, I'm afraid it's impossible. Although you haven't fought with him before, I think you should more or less have an idea of his skills. Although he was seriously injured by the Zhu Xian sword, but he is not someone that ordinary cultivators can deal with." So, she looked at him and slowly said, "Really, it's not too late for you to let go now." Ghostly was silent for a moment, but then he looked at Little White and slowly shook his head. Then he took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Then he walked towards the green light. Looking at his figure, Little White didn't continue to follow. But in her eyes, there was a faint trace of hidden bitterness and gentleness. Suddenly, she slightly raised her voice towards Ghostly's figure and said, "Do you still have that mystical fire mirror on you?" Ghostly was startled for a moment and stopped. He turned his head and said, "Yes, what's wrong?" Little White's face seemed a little helpless. She slowly shook her head and said, "Remember, first, the beast deity can be defeated. Second, in a critical moment, you could try using the mystical fire mirror." Ghostly nodded. Although he still didn't understand, he didn't want to ask more and said, "Thank you." After he finished speaking, he continued to turn around and merged into the darkness. In the distance, the monkey Little Gray's soft squeaking sound could be heard. Little White looked at the darkness and stood in the same place. She silently stood there for a long time, as if she was startled, but also as if she was silently waiting for something. Under the green light, there was indeed a stone door, but the door had long disappeared. Only the green light could be seen clearly at this moment. It turned out that it was a huge green gem that was inlaid on the stone wall of the stone door. Ghostly didn't stop and walked in. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. A burning brazier was placed alone on the ground in the distance. Around the brazier's flames was darkness, and he couldn't see how big this stone room was. But behind the flames, he could clearly see a man wearing bright silk clothes, sitting on the ground with his back against a small stone table, smiling at him. He was once familiar with that person's face. Beside that man, the evil beast Tautai slowly stood up and roared in a low voice filled with hostility. That man who looked a little coquettish, although his face was tired, there seemed to be a faint smile in his eyes. He smiled at Ghostly, who was standing at the door, and said, "We meet again." Chapter 394. Central Plains, abandoned morgue outside Hyang City. This mysterious person broke Tanis Ka's spell with one move, using his unfathomable skills to stun everyone. Even Tanis Ka's special escape skill was seen through by him, and in his speech and actions, this person did not deny the mysterious connection with Qinyan's sect In addition to his unfathomable Tai Chi Xianqing Wei cultivation, this mysterious person's background was unimaginable. However, as the person's dark figure gradually neared, that strange malevolent air shrouded over Tanis Ka, Tani, and Wild Dog Taoist no longer had any spare thoughts to think about these things. After breaking Tanis Ka's spell, that person's body hidden in the shadows seemed to be stimulated, started to pant slowly. His breathing slowly became heavy. Tanis Ka frowned tightly, staring at that figure. There was not much fear in his eyes, instead more puzzlement. Based on the high level of skills that this mysterious person had displayed, it was naturally impossible for him to be out of breath after just a few moves. Obviously, this person's body seemed to have some hidden illness or some strange symptoms that even a person with such a high level of skills like him could not control himself. But even so, from the outside, that mysterious person not only did not show any signs of weakening. On the contrary, as the malevolent air continued to rise, Tai Chi Xianqing Wei's pure and gentle air subsided. The malevolent air and pressure shrouding over was not inferior to it. At this moment, anyone who faced that pair of dark red eyes that gradually lit up after the black air would know what this mysterious person was going to do next. Tanis Ka clenched his teeth, seemed to have made up his mind, suddenly wanted to pull Wild Dog Taoist and Xiao Huan behind him. Where he stretched out his hand, Wild Dog Taoist was pulled over, but Xiao Huan pulled empty air. Tanis Ka was surprised. Before he could turn his head to look, a figure flashed past. Xiao Huan was already standing in front of him, facing that mysterious person. Tanis Ka was stunned. Tani anxiously said, "Grandpa, you all leave quickly, I will block him." Tanis Ka angrily said, "What do you know? This person's cultivation is not a small matter. Quickly." Before he said come back, Xiao Huan had already made her move, facing that mysterious person. This beautiful and pure young lady suddenly raised her hands. A black book with wordless cover faintly flashed past her hands. The next moment, the 7 mysterious blood jade bone pieces that Mr. Ghost gave her appeared in her hands. A dark aura, invisible yet seemingly tangible, suddenly spread out of thin air and descended upon this abandoned courtyard. Tanis Ka stopped in astonishment. Even the mysterious person who was approaching in front of him let out a soft sound of surprise and stopped. Completely different from that mysterious man's ferocious aura, but also containing the same strange dark aura, gushed over from all directions. This place was originally a morgue. The Yin energy was already extremely heavy. This time Xiao Huan had unleashed her strange ghost way skills. Immediately ghost howls resounded. The Yin wind, miserable, like thousands of ghosts howling, made one's heart congested and flustered. 7 blood jade bone pieces slowly floated up from Tani's hands, like being controlled by an invisible hand, lined up in a triangle shape in the air before Tani. On each piece, those blood-stained areas slowly glowed with dark red light, like 7 slowly opened eyes, staring at that mysterious person. In the chilly wind that filled the courtyard, the mysterious man's clothes also fluttered, but he did not seem to be confused by these ghosts and spirits at all. The pair of eyes hidden behind the black shadow slightly narrowed, and suddenly said in a cold voice, "Ghost out technique." Tani frowned slightly. Her beautiful face right now appeared slightly pale, not knowing if it was because it was her first time using this skill and she was not familiar with it, or the girl was naturally repulsed and afraid of ghosts and spirits. But no matter what, the Ghost Way skills that she used for the first time, through the catalysis of the Ghost Way treasure blood jade bone pieces, had already formed. A layer of deep, dark energy gradually condensed around Tani's body, and as Tani's arm turned, it took shape. A huge black skull that was incompatible with Tani's appearance looked extremely strange. The 7 blood jade bone shards also slowly rose into the air and embedded themselves into the eye sockets of the skeleton formed by the black gas. In an instant, the skeleton seemed to have been reborn. Its eyes shone brightly with a red light. It opened its mouth and let out a breath. A gust of cold wind rose and surged out like thunder. A ray of black gas shot out from its mouth like a sharp arrow towards the mysterious person. The sound of the arrow piercing through the air was like a bird's whistle, and in the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of the mysterious person. The mysterious person's figure turned, and although it seemed slow, he dodged the fierce ghost chi arrow by a hair's breadth. The ghost chi arrow pierced through the air, and the surging sound seemed to still be beside his ears. However, before he could even catch his breath, the black skeleton in front of him actually spat out black and ferocious ghost arrows in succession. The arrows whistled through the air as they shot directly towards the mysterious figure. Moreover, the directions of the arrows were slightly different as well. They shot up, down, left, and right, and they actually didn't leave any room for maneuver. Behind Xiao Huan, Zhou Yixian and Wild Dog Taoist's countenance changed. The difference was that Wild Dog Taoist was surprised and delighted. He did not expect Xiao Huan's skills to be so powerful. And Zhou Yixian's expression was much more complicated. There was no joy on his face, more worry and doubt. And at this moment, Zhou Yixian's expression suddenly changed, stepped back, looked towards the other direction of the courtyard. That was not where Xiao Huan and that mysterious person were fighting. On the contrary, what everyone did not notice, they had just investigated a place, the abandoned house of the morgue. The shadows there were deep, but compared to the eerie atmosphere in the courtyard, that place instead seemed better. Just now, when Tanis Yixian and Wild Dog Taoist peered in from the doorway, the inside was naturally deserted. There was nothing, only remnants of broken tiles and a few worn-out coffins that made one uncomfortable looking at them. But it was these suddenly attracted Zhou Yixian's attention. Even Xiao Huan, who was fighting fiercely, for a moment he also did not notice. In that abandoned house, what appeared? Zhou Yixian's eyes stared without blinking. In the courtyard, Xiao Huan's ghost way skills were imposing. For a moment completely overwhelmed that mysterious person. The black skull she summoned kept on shooting fierce ghost arrows, one after another piercing the air, although none of them could hit that mysterious person, but it forced him to keep dodging. This eerie and strange ghost way power. Even that mysterious person with unfathomable skills was unwilling to face it head-on. Just that after a long while, although the black skull shrouding Xiao Huan did not disperse, and the red light in its eyes was still as bright, but that mysterious person changed, seemed to have seen something, sneered, suddenly in the sky, full of ghost arrows like rain, leapt up, pounced toward Xiao Huan. All the ghost arrows seemed to have lost their aim for a moment and slid past his body. The whistling sounds of the arrows were incessant, but they all flew to the side. Wild Dog Taoist and the rest turned pale. Xiao Huan also turned pale, watching that black figure about to fly near, her hands suddenly clasped together, placed in front of her chest. Immediately under her spell, the black skull with a whistle suddenly shrunk to about half its size, but at the same time also blocked in front of Xiao Huan. The 7 pieces of blood jade bone, shimmering with red light, rotated rapidly in the black skull's eyes. A red light screen instantly sprayed out, intercepting that mysterious person's path. The mysterious man snorted. Seemed like even with his skills, he also felt some fear towards this red light screen. Force himself to stopped. Instead, Xiao Huan, although temporarily out of danger, but immediately after for some reason, her entire body shook, as if her vitality was greatly injured. A streak of blackness flashed across her face. The next moment, the spell in her hands and that black skeleton in front of her both started to tremble. Even the ghost arrows that she shot out were immediately affected. From the sharp whistling, unstoppable momentum became weak and powerless, and that red light screen that Xiao Huan cast, finally under Xiao Huan's strenuous expression, gradually trembled and finally dissipated. Unexpectedly, that mysterious person after Xiao Huan's sudden decline did not attack again, instead stood still, looked at that gradually weakening girl. A cold glint flashed past his eyes. Wild Dog Taoist was anxious. He did not know why Xiao Huan, who looked like she had the upper hand just a moment ago, suddenly seemed to be badly injured and defeated. Quickly went up to support Xiao Huan, who was on the verge of collapse. When he touched her, he was immediately shocked. Not to mention Xiao Huan's body was extremely cold. In that chill, there was even a strange, unfathomable ghost power, evil energy, hissing out, as if it wanted to devour someone. Fortunately, this feeling soon dissipated as Xiao Huan sat down powerlessly. Wild Dog Taoist did not dare to be negligent. Helped Xiao Huan to sit down slowly. Tanis Isian quietly walked to Xiao Huan, carefully looked at her face, shook his head and sighed, did not speak. Xiao Huan at this moment looked extremely weak. It seemed like she could not even speak. The black skull in the air gradually faded and finally dissipated, leaving behind 7 ordinary blood jade bone pieces, slightly condensed in the air, and then fell down, landing on the stone slab in front of Xiao Huan, making a few clear sounds. That mysterious person looked at Xiao Huan, suddenly said, "This blood soul skill, how long has she trained?" Chapter 395. Tanizka slowly walked in front of Tani, blocking his view of Tani. The mysterious man looked at him. Tanizka indifferently said, "Only 1 month." The mysterious man was silent for a moment. The 2 red lights in his eyes slowly dimmed down a lot. Following the weakening of the red lights, he seemed to look more human. The ferocious air on him also faded a lot. Tanizka frowned. He had traveled extensively. Not many could be compared with him. Naturally, he could see the strangeness of this mysterious man. His eyes gradually revealed a pondering look, and then he seemed to have thought of something. Suddenly looked at the direction of the abandoned house. In the cold night wind, the house that had been abandoned for many years stood alone, dilapidated and desolate. There was really nothing special about it. Just that Tanizka's expression when he looked at it was very strange, indistinctly with some expectation. The mysterious man was silent for a while. His voice was still calm, but when he looked at Zhou Yixin's back, there was already some unexpected praise, said, "Good talent, but it's a pity to use it on the ghost Dao." Tanizka turned and looked at him, said, "This honorable sir, we have no intention to offend you. We mistakenly entered this place tonight. There is no other intention, and even more, do not want to have any conflict with you. If there's nothing else, please let the 3 of us go." The mysterious man slowly retracted his gaze, looked at Tanizka, sneered and said, "Mistakenly entered this place. You all say it so easily. Who knows you all or not?" Halfway through his sentence, suddenly, that person's body trembled slightly and actually interrupted his words. Zhou Yixin was startled, and then he clearly saw, on the face that was covered by the black veil, in the eye sockets, 2 spots of red light, slowly lit up again. The ferocious air rose again, invisibly shrouded over, pressuring everything, even more than before. Tanizka's countenance changed greatly, abruptly stepped back, pulled up the powerless Tani, hurriedly said to the shocked Wild Dog Taoist, "Quickly split up and run. 1 is 1. Wild Dog Taoist also seemed to understand something, but before he could speak, the darkness ahead suddenly congealed. The Yin wind surged. A huge shadow abruptly shrouded down from the sky, completely shrouded the 3 of them. There was no way out. Wild Dog Taoist, with a loud roar, pounced forward, pressed Xiao Huan under his body, using his body to block that black shadow. Tanis Isian was stunned. The complicated expression on his old face changed again, but in a flash, that incomparably powerful darkness like the sky curtain fell into the mortal world, the heavy power unstoppable, with a loud rumble, like a 10,000 zhong Mount Tai pressing down. Looked like the 3 of them would be crushed into powder. At this critical moment, at the critical moment of life and death, a scarlet light suddenly flashed in that abandoned house, as if someone suddenly roared in the darkness. The light instantly expanded, like the suppressed anger for a long time, in a blink pierced through the darkness, became an incomparably dazzling, huge light pillar, forcibly shot out from the dark depths of the abandoned house. What followed was a thunder-like roar. The entire abandoned house in an instant split into pieces by a great force. Innumerable debris shot up into the sky with a loud roar. Scarlet light dazzled. Like a raging fire, a figure transformed into a huge dragon, streaked across the dark void, with a thunderous momentum, shot towards that mysterious man. The strange shadow that was about to crush Tanizka, Tani, and Wild Dog Taoist into pieces Suddenly, like a whale sucking in water, the enormous pressure suddenly disappeared. Tanis Ka and the rest felt the world spinning, their minds dizzy. In the distance, facing the light figure that shot over, the mysterious figure also seemed to be extremely angry, and the blood-red color in his eyes became even more intense. Suddenly, both of his hands reached out and blocked in front of him, instantly condensing into a black shadow wall, forcefully blocking the blazing scarlet light. However, under the intense battle between the two sides, the area where the scarlet light and the black shadow intersected seemed to have also become white-hot, constantly emitting strange hissing sounds. From afar, the surrounding scenery actually began to vaporize, and surging heat waves began to roll, drifting up bit by bit into the sky. And right now, the figures of the two mysterious figures could not be seen clearly. On such a peaceful night, in such a deserted morgue, there were actually people with such profound cultivation, fighting to the death here. Suddenly, in the deepest part of the light, a loud sound burst out like a sudden clap of thunder in the horizon. Instantly, a huge gust of strong wind hit them. Sand billowed all around. All objects were shot out. Even Tanis Ka and the rest also involuntarily flipped and floated out. In that clap of thunder, there seemed to be a loud, angry roar, like thunder. "You still not turning back?" Replying that voice was a sneer, containing endless disdain and arrogance. The light and shadow wavered and then finally slowly dimmed and dissipated. A huge pit suddenly appeared in the sand. In the pit stood two people facing each other. One was someone Tanis Ka, and the rest had never seen before, short and fat, face full of anger, holding a scarlet celestial sword. Awe-inspiring, just that not knowing if he was injured, at the corner of this person's mouth, there were traces of blood. And the other person, looking at his attire, it was that mysterious figure they were fighting just now. But right now, the layer of black gas that shrouded him had already dissipated, not knowing if. It was because the fight with this short and fat person was too intense and could not be maintained. Looking from afar, this mysterious person was wearing Qing Yun sect Taoist robe, but his face was plain, 5 long strands of beard. The first impression he gave was that of a Taoist master, outstanding and extraordinary appearance. Just that right now his eyes were glinting with cold light, red light flashing, added some strangeness. That short and fat person glanced at Tanis Ka and the rest, seemed to see that the three of them were temporarily not in danger, then revealed a slightly relieved expression. Then his expression turned grim, stared at that Taoist, after a long while, sneered and coldly said, "You think with this executioner heart-lock Tao technique you could trap me?" The Taoist's eyes flashed with a red light, and the ferocious aura on his body was extremely strong, almost like a tangible object, constantly expanding and exhaling. He said eerily, "I've forgotten. This Tao technique was originally created by your sect's founder, but it doesn't feel good to use it on you." "Hey," that fat person shouted. "You have fallen into the evil way, still dare to talk nonsense. Executioner Heartlock has long been banned by the generations of founders. Now you ignore the teachings. Do you still have Qing Yun sect generations of founders in your eyes?" That Taoist sneered, said, "That day you and I had a great battle. The destruction of Founder's ancestral hall. It was not my credit alone. Do you still have Qing Yun sect generations of founders in your eyes?" That fat person choked, but then became even more furious. Just that for a moment he did not know what to say, only stared fiercely at that Taoist. That Taoist assessed the fat person a few times, suddenly sneered and said, "I think you better not force yourself, although your cultivation is more profound than I thought. Actually able to forcefully break the executioner heartlock prohibition, but in order to save the three of them, you expended your cultivation to forcefully open it. Right now your chi and blood are flowing back, your entire body's energy channels are shaking. At most you only have 60% of your usual cultivation." He coldly sneered, said, "That day when you were at your peak, you were still not my match, captured by me and imprisoned in this abandoned coffin. Now you still dare to be my enemy." The fat person did not have the slightest sign of fear or retreat, sternly said, That year you and Juan's senior brother were peerless talents, sweeping away the evil and demons. After I followed you, even if I died for you, I did not have the slightest regret. But today you are no longer the person of that year, and what I am doing is exactly what you and Juan's senior brother did 9 times without regret. He let out a long howl. His expression was resolute, but there was also deep sorrow. He shouted, "Take my sword." Before he finished his words, his figure, like lightning, instantly blended into the scarlet light, like a huge dragon soaring in the sky, pounced over. The red glow in the Taoist's eyes intensified, but his pupils constricted slightly. The scarlet beam of light was so powerful that it seemed to be able to cut through the sky and split the heavens and earth. It was almost unstoppable, and the only path left was to perish together with the enemy. But he suddenly sneered, his right hand waved. Suddenly a cold light floated up, not much dazzling light, but it blocked the scarlet light column's path in front of him. And when that cold light and scarlet light column came into contact, suddenly it shone brilliantly. It looked blunt and dull, but it actually cut in. A burst of dazzling light flickered and swayed. The fatty suddenly let out an angry roar, followed by a cry of pain. Immediately, the scarlet light was deflected and dispersed. The fatty staggered and was sent flying. When he landed on the ground, he couldn't stand still and was forced to retreat. As he retreated, he spat out a mouthful of blood. It was obvious that he was heavily injured. Even his clothes and chest area were dyed red with blood. As for the Taoist, a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Looking closely, he was actually holding an ordinary ancient sword in his hand. The ancient sword's shape was simple and crude, and the material was even more strange. It looked like stone, but it wasn't. The strangest thing was that this ancient sword was actually broken. The first 2 feet of the sword was actually broken. Blood flowed out from that fat person's mouth, stared fiercely at that Taoist, hissed, You actually dare to bring Zhu Xian's sword down Qingyan Hill?" That Taoist laughed wildly to the sky, his attitude extremely savage. And far away, Tanis Ka and the rest were more and more shocked, until the end. Their minds were a blank. Zhu Xian ancient sword, the broken sword in that Taoist's hand, was actually the world-famous celestial number 1 sword. Zhu Xian ancient sword? Then what kind of people were these 2 terrifyingly skilled people? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.